who?
No foolish heroics, if you please.
Is Darkman. They destroyed everything he had, all that he loved, everything that he was. Now, crime has a new enemy, and justice has a brand new face.
I was afraid that you wouldn't want me anymore.
Of course I still want you.
The good news is that I know who's behind our little troubles of late. Finish it.
He has the power to look like any man.
These two are both sons of witches!
But he is unlike any man.
I gotta tell you something about me.
He's a cockroach. You think you kill him? And he pops up someplace else.
In the darkest hour,
Julie, who's the real monster here?
there's a light that shines on every human being. But one. From director Sam Raimi, Darkman.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Rolled Spine Podcast. I'm a legal machine. With me is
Mr. Fix-It
and
Diablo Frank.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the movie 1990's Darkman.
So Dick Tracy must have come out that same year then, because I remember Batman came out in '89, and everybody had superhero comic book movie fever, and so Disney tried to make it happen again with Dick Tracy.
without the nose.
It did okay. It didn't do terrible or anything, but they weren't in any kind of rush to do a sequel either.
These are the top 10 highest grossing films of 1990. Number 1, Ghost. Number 2, Home Alone. Number 3, Pretty Woman. Number 4, Dances with Wolves. Number 5, Total Recall. Number 6, Back to the Future Part 3. Number 7, Die Hard 2. Number 8, Presumed Innocent. Number 9, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And number 10, Kindergarten Cop.
Oh, well.
Quite the slew of films there in the top 10. Some stinkers.
I don't know if there's... which one is the
Those are
stinker?
pretty solid, huh?
Back to the Future 3 was
Nah,
pretty
it's,
It was
a good way to end the trilogy.
Yeah, it wasn't a good way to end the trilogy, but it was underwhelming, but it wasn't bad.
Die Hard 2 has always been sort of been like the, oh yeah, that movie exists.
But ain't that the one with the military soldiers at the end where they turn out that it was all fake?
It's the one without Samuel Jackson and not the first one. So that's the one. It happens in an airport, I think.
It's okay. Not great.
The rest, what was Presumed Innocent? I don't know.
That was Harrison Ford.
Okay, Harrison
Frank
Ford.
would know that.
So we got two Schwarzenegger movies. Total
It's
Recall,
not a Puma.
Total Recall and Kindergarten Cop. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, huge, right? Ghost, Home Alone, Pretty Woman, Dances with Wolves.
Those are all considered classics.
The first three, I don't know about Dance with Wolves. I don't think that one's held up that great over the years.
Probably not.
No, I have to
It's a
rewatch it.
Costner in it, so probably not. At the time, it was a big deal.
That's when he was on a roll.
Total Recall.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that's
Didn't we just talk about Total Recall today?
yeah. That's weird.
That's so fucking weird. We had
How
this
often
weird
does Total
conversation.
Recall randomly come up in two different conversations?
Yeah, dude, that's really fucking
well,
weird.
maybe because you saw Predator.
No, what?
No, it was completely
doesn't
something
matter.
else.
Hey,
It was
look, it
some
doesn't
other
matter.
reason.
So anyway, another film, 1990, fucking Darkman.
Yeah, well, I think
Sam Raimi's Darkman.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fair bit further down the list.
Yeah, I would assume so. Shit, we didn't even get to Gremlins. Her Gremlins did okay.
Gremlins underperformed.
We told you the rules.
You can't get them wet.
Don't let them eat after midnight.
It's always midnight somewhere.
You didn't listen.
Gremlins 2, the new batch, rated PG-13. Starts Friday, June 15th at a theater near you.
How were you introduced to Darkman?
So, in '88, Superman kills the comic book movie because nobody in Hollywood really wanted anything to do with comic book movies for a few years before that. I think Superman 3 actually probably killed the comic book movie. If not that, then Supergirl probably contributed mightily to that. There had just been this string of flops after the major success of the first two Superman movies, in part because they kept going cheap on the damn things and making really bad choices like, hey, let's make Richard Pryor the co-star of one of these things. That's a good idea. When the Batman movie came out in '89, nobody thought that thing was going to fly. Everybody's criticizing Michael Keaton's casting choice in particular. Tim Burton was still just the guy who did Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Nobody had any faith in him at that time. And then, of course, Batmania happened. Think about this. In pop culture, one of the reasons why Batman is so important to popular culture is that think of a time when something was as enormous as the 66 period Batmania. And then you managed to revisit that and have as big of a sensation decades later with the same property as you the first time. That's amazing. Batman 66 and then Batman Mania in 89. People were carving the bat symbol into their fucking heads and shit.
I did it in my yard.
You could argue it happened again with Dark Knight Returns or with Dark Knight.
No,
with all the Jokers.
Nowhere near. But nowhere
fucking
near.
Kidding me, dude? We got Steampunk Joker, dude.
I get that.
Steampunk Joker.
But there was not a single individual in the Western world that did not have some piece of Batman paraphernalia in 1989. However big Dark Knight might have been, the Joker stuff, and I know it's had longevity too. There's still this whole cult of Joker.
You're talking yourself into my side. Okay.
Right. No, but everybody.
Yeah,
okay, just to give you an example. My stepfather was working security. He decided to paint our 69 Chevy black with a fucking paintbrush because he was mental. And then he put bat symbols on that truck. That's how fucking crazy Batmania was.
I remember going to Mervyn's and Batman had an entire section to himself. From underwear to t-shirts to handkerchiefs to belts, everything. Like that was the boy section and they literally cut it in half just to give it to Batman. And it got bigger as the movie was out longer. Like I remember they'd have, a couple of shelves. I remember going one time and it was a whole section, all Batman. Because we bought everything Batman. Dude, I had all kinds of Batman shit.
You couldn't go to a fucking convenience store without finding Batman sections.
Yeah, that's
it was insane.
And everybody was collecting everything Batman. Cups, posters. I remember that was a big deal. The posters, the standing poster, yeah.
So Batman was so enormous while also being something of a sleeper because while they hoped that it would be a huge hit at Warner Brothers, there was a real good chance this thing was going to be an enormous stinker and not do anything. Because there had not been, aside from the Superman movies, there had not been a strong comic book movie like that. And then Batman happens and everybody wants that, but you've got like 6 months production time. So they're looking to see anything that they've got in the pipeline that they could get out in 1990 to capitalize on that popularity. One of those things was Dick Tracy because that had already been in the works. But Dick Tracy, if you look at his DNA, that's far more like Popeye.
Yeah.
That's far more, this is a comic strip that had a very comic strip mentality. It was not about superheroes.
Very cartoony.
Yeah, it was a musical.
Yeah.
So it was just a whole other thing that they tried to fit into the Batman mold, but it just did not take. The only movie that I think was even remotely a comic book movie that come out that following year was Darkman. And I saw this movie in Pasadena with my half-brother.
Well, let's not gloss over Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but okay, go ahead.
Was that 92?
Yeah.
No, I mean, literally, was that 90?
It was one of the highest grossing films on the list. I think it was 9 on the list.
Okay, so I stand corrected.
Right above Kindergarten Cop.
I stand corrected. So, and was Dick Tracy on that list or no?
No.
Okay.
It did horrible.
No, it didn't do horrible. It did like 100.
Well, it didn't even make the top 10. So, I mean, it got doubled up by Kindergarten Cop. So let's chill out.
Yeah. But Kindergarten Cop was a big thing at its time. But Dick Tracy still did 150 million, so it didn't do too bad for $1990. This movie did not do that. I think it made somewhere in the realm of 60 million, somewhere in that realm.
With a budget of
like 30 million.
Okay.
Yeah. So it more than doubled its money. It did extremely well on VHS. But me and my half brother saw it in the theater. We both fucking loved it. I think he had some interest in it, but I was the one who was gung ho about seeing this flick. I don't know if I'd seen Evil Dead 2 by this point. I know that I was going to Grumpy's, and I know that's where I rented Evil Dead from, but I'm not sure if I knew Sam Raimi. I know that I had seen Crime Wave, though, which was a very little scene, gonzo, dark comedy thing that he had done after the first Evil Dead that flopped in a huge way. But all these flops had this long life on cable. And so in the early days of cable, that was one of those movies that played a lot because it was cheap. And so I saw that. It was a weird fucking movie. I thought it was okay. It didn't leave a major impression on me as a kid, but at least I'd been exposed to that very gonzo, very distinctive Sam Raimi style even before the Evil Dead movie. But I don't think I saw Darkman based on that. I think I just saw it based on the trailers, which I thought were fucking awesome. And the movie poster. I fucking loved that movie poster. You know the one, right?
Wasn't it in the back of comic books too?
Yes.
I think that's why we saw it.
They were very smart to help publicize the movie. But it was also, I have an issue of Premiere Magazine from that time period, and it's on the back cover of that. In fact, I kept it. I cut the back cover off just to keep the movie poster representation.
Because I remember, the only reason I saw it was because it was on the back of a comic book.
There was like a whole month's worth of comic books from I think both DC and Marvel.
Yeah.
Where it was the back cover.
And I remember that was a friend of mine at the time was like, hey, let's go see this. Let's go see this. I wasn't like, oh yeah. I was like, okay, we'll go check it out at the local.
Were you into comic books by that point?
Yeah, I was reading comics. I've been reading comics forever, but
right.
I never really liked the advertising. I never particularly followed the advertising. I was just the comics.
But you had seen that image on the
on the back.
Okay.
Yeah, and I remember my friend was just like, let's go see it. Basically skipped school one day, halfway through the day, decided to go to a local cinema and went there, watched it. And I was just like, wow, what the fuck did we just watch? That was really weird. So I remember that. It was pretty cool.
And you, Mac?
I don't know. I just remember this shit playing on TV occasionally.
So you saw it on TV? Or one of those things you call bits of it?
Saw it is probably a strong word. I think I remember the video game more than I remember anything.
Really?
Yeah, I forgot about the video game. That did exist. How was that?
I don't know. I just
Never
remember seeing
played
it. I probably just passed it over in the rental aisle at Blockbuster.
Okay.
Blockbuster. Good times.
There's still one left in the Dakotas.
There'll always be one in my heart.
So
I'll get that checked out.
You've never actually seen this movie all the way through then?
No way.
We should probably give a light synopsis. I think most anybody who's going to listen to a Darkman episode of the podcast has probably already seen this movie. We can go a little light on it.
You've been wanting to get this podcast done for a long time.
Okay.
So maybe
I'll do it.
Maybe you should do it and just take care of it.
Short version is the movie starts off with a meeting in a dockyards between two criminals, Mr. Black and Durant.
I got 3 things to say to you, Durant. 1, I ain't selling my property. 2, nobody muscles Eddie Black, especially a bunch of dinks. And 3, if yours don't like that, which I can already see you don't, we can cut your balls off. Maybe that'd be more satisfactory to you.
Durant's played by Larry Drake, who is best known for LA Law. He played a special needs person who worked in the offices, and he was just like this really gentle soul, this very kind of stereotypical, benighted, afflicted individual or differently abled individual.
He was also Dr. Giggles.
This is before Dr. Giggles.
I know.
Yeah. So
that's where I know him from. He's fucking Dr. Giggles.
He's Dr. Giggles.
Holy shit, we're dating the shit out of ourselves in this one, man.
But he got Dr. Giggles on the strength of this movie. When he was cast in this movie, he was the guy from LA Law. Nobody wanted to hire him.
How many Dr. Giggles did they make? Fuck this. You know what? Let's watch Dr. Giggles instead. I'm all lathered up to watch me some Dr. Giggles now.
Universal Pictures presents Dr. Giggles, a twisted tale of medical mayhem.
He's a psychiatric patient who escapes from a mental institution and goes back to his hometown to continue his father's work. His father's work happened to be killing people and cutting out their hearts.
If you think that's bad, wait till you get my bill. I hope you have protection.
I've never seen Dr. Giggles.
Oh, dude, it's fantastic.
Oh, fuck. Didn't they make like 3 of them?
I think so.
Oh, shit.
I just remember the first one distinctively. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Frank.
Dr. Giggles. I mean, it's fucking Dr. Giggles. I forgot about Dr. Giggles until you just mentioned it. Holy shit.
He wasn't getting those kind of roles. Apparently, he played like a lot of truckers and stuff. He was playing either rednecks. So nobody saw him as being a villain, especially a lead villain in the movie. But he walks into the audition. Sam Raimi isn't a TV guy. Didn't know him from anything before. He thought that he had an Edward G. Robinson quality to him.
Distinctiveness.
Thuggish presence, yeah. And cast him against, everybody's expectations. And of course, he absolutely relished this opportunity because he never got to play sophisticated crime boss and everything. And he just took to it like a fish to water. So in the sequence, they're meeting in a dockyard. There's a conflict between these two parties. The villains that are working with Durant are cartoonish. In particular, there's one guy who has a wooden leg that has a machine gun built into it. So when things go south, they rip it off of him and start gunning down the opposing gang. Finally, we approach Mr. Black, who is, of course, an African-American gentleman, because this movie has a lot of touchy racial stuff going on in it. And Durant proceeds to remove all of his fingers with a cigarette lighter.
He removes the first 3 because he's making 3 points.
No, it's not a cigarette lighter. It's the fucking...
No, it's the cigar cutter. Cigar cutter. Yeah, sorry.
He got 3 points he wants to make. And the first point is he has anger issues.
He has anger issues. The second point is he has trouble controlling it. The third point is he has 7 more points
to make. Yeah.
Hey, and there was only one Dr. Giggles, by the way. I don't know why I thought there was more than that. Oh. Anyway, sorry. I had to fact check my Dr. Giggles. Hey, Dr. Giggles fans, don't call me out. I corrected my mistake.
So this
hey, listen to the Giggles cast. I'm Legal Machine. With me is...
So this is followed up by introducing our lead characters. You've got Liam Neeson playing...
Darkman.
He's not Darkman yet.
He's playing Eric Bana from the Incredible Hulk, from the Hulk movie.
Did they call his name out?
Dr. Peyton Wesley.
Okay.
And he's a good-natured scientist who's trying to develop an artificial skin for people who've had...
Burn victims,
yeah. He works with an Asian-American lab assistant, Nakatito or something like that. Some ridiculous name that doesn't even sound like it's an actual Japanese name. It sounds like somebody made it up. Not unlike Mr. Black, the African-American mobster. And thankfully, in the movie, besides being Yakatito, he's not too bad, although at one point Durant does refer to him as a houseboy. I read the comic adaptation of this where he's full-on Asian minstrel. Not good shit. Like, I was afraid when we were watching this movie they were going to go there with it. And it's not a great representation, but it's not as horrifying as the comic book adaptation was.
Wow.
Awesome. So
man, that's the... I haven't seen it. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Do we remember?
You saw the line.
I want to keep Giggles cast clean, so we're not going to do it.
I need the names of these characters. I
thought you knew all the names, man.
I don't know if fucking by heart.
You're such a huge fan of this movie. I thought you'd be like franking the shit out of us all the time.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting distracted by one fucking tangent after another. So I was like, all right.
You're fucking turned on about Giggles Cast. You know what? Fuck you. We're staying here till 4 o'clock in the morning. After this, we're making you sit through Dr. Giggles.
No.
That's my name.
Okay, so Frances McDormand plays Julie Hastings. That's the love interest. Oh, they do a really nice job of, she's a lawyer, and she is actually, to a large degree, driving the story.
Herb, hi, it's Julie Hastings. Listen, I found some memos when I was researching the von Hoffenstein deal that I don't think I was supposed to find. They're from Strack to a guy named Claude Belisarius, and they're records of payments to various people on the zoning commission. Well, I think they're payoffs. Yeah, well, what I want to do is talk to Strack first, give him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, okay. All right, I'll talk to you later, Herb. Bye.
In her law practice, she's found a memorandum that indicates payoffs involving Durant. She confronts this person that she's working with, this mogul who's trying to build up this real estate project and stuff. And he basically cops to being dirty, but he just wants her to kind of forget it for the greater good. She's like, well, I'm not sure that I could do that. Not only would it be unethical, but I don't even have the memorandum with me. And so Peyton Westlake's working with his assistant. They finally figured out that the artificial skin that they were creating that could not last beyond 99 minutes before it fell apart is photosensitive. It'll fall apart. As long as it's in the dark, it'll be fine. But it's 99 minutes in the dark light and it falls apart. Just to make that realization, Durant and his boys show up, murder Nakatito, and absolutely torture Liam Neeson's character.
Yeah, that was kind of a hate torture. That wasn't like...
Well, because they found the memorandum before they'd done all the grievous bodily harm to him, and they were just like too into it. They couldn't stop. They couldn't pull out.
Still weak compared to RoboCop, but...
In terms of brutality?
Yeah.
I would think clearly influenced by RoboCop, though.
Yeah. With the dudes all laughing and having a great time while they're just absolutely mangling this dude.
Beating him up, burning his hands off, yeah.
You saw the claymation burning the hands, too. I like that. It's obviously not to modern standards, but it's grisly.
This makes it great, though.
Yeah, I would absolutely think that Paul Verhoeven had a huge influence on Darkman. There's a lot of RoboCop in the DNA of this movie. But yeah, they inflict all this grievous bodily harm on him, and then, of course, there's the key moment where they start up some gas, and they get one of those drinky crows. Is that what you call them?
Drinking bird. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a little bird where it's got mercury or some other liquid in it, and it causes it to sway back and forth. And then they set a particularly sensitive lighter, because I know that the tap of this plastic bird should not have activated this lighter, but maybe they had a specially rigged one. And so they leave him be. He's crawling, his hands are blackened, you can see bones sticking out, his face is all fucked up, and he's just about to make it to the lighter when the bird activates it, detonating the gas. It just so happens that the wannabe fiance, they made a point of having him propose to her earlier in the sequence, just to really drive home.
Think about it.
Yeah, she had to think about it.
Julie, wait. I've been thinking. We should get married.
Marriage. Now, I've just started getting things going at the firm, and I really like having my own place.
But we're practically living together now. All marriage means is you answer the phone in the morning, and if it's my grandmother, you don't have to pretend it's the wrong number. Poor woman's beginning to think she has Alzheimer's.
I can't talk about it now.
Come here. Jules, I'm asking you to marry me.
Hey, I love you.
I mean, I realized...
But I gotta think it over, okay?
And she's showing up, and she makes it pretty clear that she's going to, go ahead and say yes. But then he gets blowed the fuck up. And they have that cool transition where she goes from standing in front of...
Well, no. You're talking about when he gets blown out the roof of the building and goes past the camera because it's an aerial shot of the roof of the building.
And he's on fire,
And when it explodes, his flaming semi-corpse is ejected out of the building past the camera and into the nearby harbor.
Which was a great scene.
Awesome. Yeah, it looked really good.
Well, then they literally set somebody on fire and had them jump, into the water. There's no CGI.
Oh, yeah,
there's
they
no
definitely dropped
dummies.
That was all practical. Yeah, it was all practical.
When was the last time you saw somebody get set on fire in one of these movies? It used to be
they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, it used to be a big thing, and I guess, people did die from that shit, so that's probably one of the reasons why you don't want to do that anymore. I'm sure insurance doesn't want to cover it anymore, but back in the 70s and 80s, they were always setting people on fire.
Hence the Fall Man. The Fall Guy. My bad. Dropped it. My bad.
Damn it, dude.
totally dropped it.
Well, now I'm the theme song's playing in my head, so I'm completely
Great
lost.
theme song. Great theme song, Fall Guy.
Don't remember that one. Play the movie?
I'm the unknown stuntman that made Eastwood such a star.
Yeah.
You know what? I never really watched that show. I never really watched that show.
Really?
Never
I
watched
like
it.
Fall Guy.
Fall Guy was awesome.
Was he
it in a block?
detective?
Was it in a block with Dukes of Hazzard, or was it a?
No, that was a different network. Fall Guy was ABC, Dukes of Hazzard was CBS.
I could have sworn.
But was
You
he
might have made it.
But wait a minute. I got one question.
Magnum?
Magnum was CBS.
Yeah,
too.
CBS. I've never watched an episode of Fall Guy. Was he a detective or what was he?
No, he was a stuntman who ended up. I think he did he helped out with investigations with a lawyer. Marky Post played a lawyer on the show,
Okay.
and I think that he as a side deal would do investigations for her. But he technically was a professional stuntman.
Okay, I've never seen the show and I just it made no sense to me.
I think Heather Thomas was in that one. I think you'd remember the show pretty well if you'd seen Heather Thomas.
Yeah.
Every episode opened with her in a bikini during the credit sequence.
During the credit sequence.
Yeah, and you're like, whoa!
Hey, everybody, welcome to Stuntcast.
Well, you literally was talking about wanting to do a Fall Guy. Which one of you were, right?
No, I was. I actually know the name of the show.
Yeah, he's seen the show.
Yeah, that's probably,
He was trying to call back to my joke off air and just fucking fucked up. Just shit the bed, dude. It's Fall Guy. It's 2 words, and what'd you call it? Oh, make a Fall Man podcast. Oh, fuck.
Fuck you.
Anyway, continue.
He was the only one falling in that conversation.
Anyway, so there was a great transition where she's standing in front of the building, the burning building, and then it fades. She's standing in front of the taxi just driven off or whatever. So she's standing there like, oh my god, this building just blew up. And then
it is nice how the taxi drives off after the explosion. Yeah. Oh wait, no, she's standing there. The taxi drove off before the explosion.
I think it drove off before.
Okay.
And then as it fades away from her, the background fades into a cemetery where she's at his funeral.
Yeah, and she gets enshrouded by mourning. Yeah.
So then they're talking to the gravedigger, and he was just like, man, you sure do that one quick. He was like, but not hard. All they found was an ear.
Wasn't much depth. So that's where we're at. So how are we liking the opening so far? Especially you, Mac, who have not seen this
I like it so far. I thought the opening with the 2 gangs, that was a lot of fun.
Very dynamic.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. He took the dude's wooden leg.
Come on, do the joke. Do the joke. He goes, bum leg, no leg. I dated a girl one time with a wooden leg. What happened? I had to break it off.
Yeah.
But you got to give this movie credit. Most comic movies, they're doing the origin. It's so slow. You're losing the first hour to fucking origin and talking head shit. This movie, it starts out with this big action sequence. You got 10, 15 minutes of setup, and then Darkman has been blown up. You know, you're already on your way. We're already halfway through the origin, and it's 12 minutes and 43 seconds, and the inciting incident has already occurred. That's fucking phenomenal for a comic book movie, especially one from 1990.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, they got right to it. Especially when I saw them sitting there in the fucking laboratory. I'm like, oh, I was having Hulk flashbacks. I was having Universal Hulk flashbacks.
Lady lawyers talking to the client. You're like, oh shit, we're gonna have an hour of this. Nope. So Peyton Westlake turns up at a city hospital. He's presumed to be a homeless person. Maybe there was a period of time there where they were actually setting homeless people on fire in New York. So you might have thought he was one of those fellows. He's unidentifiable because of the extreme circumstances of his attack. He can't speak for himself. I believe he's in an induced coma besides. And they decide, well, the best thing we can do for this guy, because of how bad a shape he's in, is to experiment on him. And so you have a doctor, this British lady, played by Ginny Agutter, who is probably best known for being on Logan's Run and American Werewolf in London. She also has a tie to the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You're fucking me. You know this stuff? You know it? Never mind.
Ginny Agutter.
Wow.
But the main thing is she actually ties into the Marvel Cinematic Universe because
how so?
She is in The Winter Soldier. She is the member of the council that Black Widow impersonates.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, same actress.
Next, we have a 35-year-old male, no ID, no medical history. He was found on the riverbank just south of the city. There's a sizable population of homeless and indigents there. We get at least 3 no-names like him every week. Nobody does anything about the homeless until they become train wrecks like Mr. John Doe here. He's got burns covering over 40% of his body. The hands and face are the most severe. 10 years ago, pain from the burns would have been intolerable. This man would have spent the rest of his life screaming. Now, we use the Rank-of-Eretz technique. Quite simply, we sever the nerves within the spinothalamic tract, there, which, as you know, transmits neural impulses of pain and vibratory sense to the brain. No longer receiving impulses of pain, you stick him with a pin, and he can't even feel it. As in many radical procedures, there are serious side effects to this operation. When the body ceases to feel, when so much sensory input is lost, the mind grows hungry. Starved of its regular diet of input, it takes the only remaining stimulation it has, the emotions, and amplifies them, giving rise to alienation, loneliness. Uncontrolled rage is not uncommon. Now surges of adrenaline flow unchecked through the body and brain, giving him augmented strength, hence the restraints. Naturally, we give them every chance of recovery. Remain optimistic, inspire confidence. Talk to him about rehabilitation potential. Personally, I give him a 9 on the buzzard scale.
He's extremely angry. He's extremely depressed. Everything is like off the scale with him. So he goes from being this very mild-mannered scientist in his previous life to being just kind of a raving lunatic. And of course, he can't feel anything, so you can't hurt him. You can't prevent him from doing something through pain, only restraint. And as he proves very quickly, restraint is an issue for him. He rips himself out of his strength and escapes from the hospital. He goes back to his old lab. He manages to scavenge what he can from there. He finds an abandoned textile warehouse, if I recall correctly. It's somewhere in L.A. It was an actual warehouse. One of the great things about filming in practical locations, you can find this incredible ambiance. It's very gothic quality to it.
Very industrial.
Very 90s, very industrial. So it looks fantastic. You also can't film in a place like that anymore because it was so incredibly unsafe. Because the place was literally falling apart while they were filming in it. Horrifically hot. Just the worst environment to be trying to film in, but it looks great on film, and they didn't have to spend a ton of money on it. And so we have this whole montage of him trying to recreate his lab so they can come up with the fake skin to kind of save himself. As Mr. Fixit pointed out earlier, this movie basically predicted 3D printing. The process by which they create the artificial skin is remarkably similar to 3D printing, including...
I thought I said that, but I thought I said it.
I think we both said that, I thought.
I thought I said it, and he was like, hey, you're right. Whatever.
Okay. We also see a demonstration of what's happening in his mind when he's going to those extreme emotional places. There's this whole montage of flaming meteors and just violent science and very psychedelic
science stuff.
You also, when he's sciencing, the shit out of his
I guess it's supposed to be like neurons and electrons. And
all kinds of shit going on there. So my understanding is he had actually done something way crazier than that.
Protons.
He does something way crazier than that because the movie was influenced in part by David Lynch's The Elephant Man. And there was some crazy imagery throughout David Lynch's movies. I think borrowing somewhat from Eraserhead too. And so apparently Raimi had done this really bizarre, freaky sequence that was much longer. The studio hated it, and it's never seen the light of day. Nobody knows whatever happened with all that stuff that was put together through chemical reaction, photography, claymation, just this whole thing.
Okay.
And none of that stuff survived. The studio didn't like it. It got cut and it vanished. You pointed out that there's a sequence where he's digging in a dumpster. He finds some old theater costumes that have been tossed out, and that's where he gets his distinctive trench coat kind of thing that he wears. Apparently, that was a real thing too. Apparently, I think they found some old theater costumes and they were recycling them for this movie. But also, the sequence where that happens strongly resembles a scene from Kenneth Branagh's version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which itself was trying to bite the popularity of Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. And one of the things that drove me nuts about that movie is it was so obvious that Coppola was trying to do his best to rip off Sam Raimi's stylistic flourishes. Mm-hmm. So you got this weird cycle of influence. Well, it goes back to the Darkman, which probably did the worst financially of any of them, even though he was a modest success in the theater.
Well, no, because I remember when I saw that scene, I watched the Mary Shelley Frankenstein maybe 2-3 months ago. It just happened to be on TV and I watched it.
Not that great.
It's okay.
It's okay.
I remember
it was a big disappointment.
People thought it was going to be Bram Stoker's Dracula, which, while not, it was pretty respectable business. Yeah. And a lot of the goth kids seem to really enjoy it. So.
But it wasn't
they're emos now.
Well, I don't know. You might have actually done more money than Interview with the Vampire, but I know it cost a lot more money too.
But it didn't have Keanu. That was its failing. It didn't.
Interview with the Vampire didn't have it.
Huh?
Interview with the Vampire.
No, I was talking about the Frankenstein.
Oh, that.
Because I love Brent Stoker. I love when Keanu comes up.
It had Helena Bonham Carter, so you've definitely got the goth continuum. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think it was one of her first major U.S. roles. It
might be the only non-Tim Burton role she ever did in her entire life.
Oh, wow.
No, she's worked for other people, but that's like
Does
the
she
only
do
gothic
any?
thing.
I'm just saying, she's probably got a run.
Thoughts on the origin sequence we were watching?
That was cool.
Oh, it was cool. Again, the other little montage when he was trying to put together the
time,
skin.
where they're trying to show the time.
Yeah, well, and he's going through all his failed experiments trying to replicate the skin. There's beakers spinning behind him. And, just really, the imagery so far is really, really good in this movie.
And see, what's cool about it too is it's not money. It's not CGI. It's not explosions. It's just, let me do some kooky stuff with the camera and do some superimposition and give you something visually stimulating. Or it's lighting, it's sets, it's just good filmmaking. But this set doesn't cost money. It's all about technique. It's all about knowing what you can do at cinema. Raimi isn't really a horror guy. He's not even an action guy. He grew up as more of a comedy guy. He loved stuff like Three Stooges and Abbott and Costello. He borrows from those old movies, 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and updates it for modern times, and it's new all over again because it's been so long since a lot of those techniques have been used in film. So all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's so cutting edge. It's like, it's cheap, and I'm stealing from shit from 30, 40 years before the movie came out, you know?
Yeah.
It's just pure crap. And I think that's part of what's so great about the flick is even though there's a few moments here and there where you can see the budgetary restraints.
Oh, yeah, the CG in the rain with the window opening.
I don't even think that was CG. I think that was some sort of weird
blue, black, green screen.
Yeah, not even green. This is blue screen. Oh, wait, green screen, because it became blue screen now.
No, it's green screen now.
It's green screen now, so it used to be blue screen. So yeah, you're talking about some funky ass blue screen shit. But for the most part, it holds up surprisingly well for how old it is and how cheap it was. You mentioned the Darkman game earlier, and one aspect of that game I do remember well is that you actually had to run around with a camera and take pictures of people, and you had to take a certain number of pictures of each of the guys you were going after in order to create the files needed to scan to create their faces to impersonate them. And it was such a weird thing, and so particular to that game is you're not shooting at the guys, you're taking their pictures, and they're going in and out of different rooms and stuff, and you're trying to catch them so that you can get enough of the face to reconstruct them. So that also happens in this movie. It's taken from this flick. He's turning the gang against itself by impersonating them and setting them up in various ways. He also extorts information out of one of them by torturing them. He's managed to get his power of speech back, but he's obviously horrifically deformed. He can't go back to his lover because he tried before he could speak and just terrified her. He knows how he looks, and so he's trying to go back to her somewhat healed. But in the meantime, he's still targeting the gangs, and he's developing the science behind the artificial skin to where it's more realistic, more believable. He can pass under not so close inspection, but I assume with his lover, he's got to make sure that he's got it on point. I was just getting some flashbacks. When I was younger, in the early 90s, we actually managed to get a few VCRs, because for the longest time there, we didn't have any, in part because we were constantly pawning the things. But at some point in the early 90s, enough VCRs had been out there, and they'd moved on to better generation ones. We managed to get some old crummy ones. And so I actually could tape from VHS to VHS, and so I tried to do some video editing. And one point in particular is I tried to do a music video for Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses, involving clips from various movies, one of which was the sequence where he's in the hospital from this flick. So I always get that flashback to that. One thing I do like is the movie slows down a bit after his accident because they really want to sell how fucked up he is, how it's messed him up mentally, messed him up physically, how he cannot relate to the woman that he loves, how he can't function in society because he's so hard to look at. I mean, one part of his face is just ashen. It's still relatively intact, but it's so pale and has this sort of sickly glistening to it where it looks like dead skin just sort of hanging off his face. And then the rest of him is ridiculously burnt. You can see this huge differentiation between where his intact skin is and where he's basically just raw muscle, just like meat. And then he essentially has no lips, but they cover him up with bandages. However, they always have them sort of loose so you can see little bits of him hanging off of there. And it does a great job of selling the horror of his circumstance. You understand why he can't just be like, yeah, sure, I got bitten by the spider. And then I, found the guy that was responsible for Uncle Ben's death. And then just kind of went back to, life as usual. It's like, no, he can't. He cannot function that way. He's just too fucked up mentally and physically to make that happen. And my understanding is that Raimi, going back before the Batman movie, had tried to get a Batman movie made. He'd also tried to do The Shadow. He had tried to do The Phantom. And the fact is, he was known for making non-rated, extremely gory horror movies like Evil Dead. And he could not get the financing. Nobody wanted to give him the rights either. So that's why Darkman came into existence. He basically couldn't get the rights to anybody else, so he just made up his own. With a heavy influence from the Universal Monsters, because while he wasn't necessarily a monster fan, he did like those concepts. Also, they tried to base it at least somewhat in real science. There's the things that you're pointing out that a lot of the tables you saw him in the movie are in actual hospitals. One of Sam Raimi's brothers, Ted, is an actor who appears in a bunch of Sam Raimi stuff. Another one of his brothers is a doctor and actually gave them real science stuff to make the premise as realistic as possible within the confines of a spectacular, pulpish action movie. I do think, though, that with that much exposed non-skin, the meat basically. Yeah, you'd be dead from infections, especially under the living conditions he's under. But you give it a little bit of license because it's supposed to be essentially a monster movie crossed with pulp vigilante type stuff.
I think it works so much better to have the bandages kind of hanging off and giving you little glimpses of how horrifically mangled he is, as opposed to just showing us. You know what I mean? Like, especially because we know the effects weren't there. I don't. The effects would never actually be there, right?
The latex isn't bad because they do a lot of stuff with him making the artificial skin. Obviously, they did molds, and so they just hang it off and stuff. It makes it look like really impressive and like science. But you're right. When you're actually looking at it on somebody's face straight on, you end up with like a Spawn thing going on, where after a while it just becomes rubber.
Yeah. So I just think it works a lot better. Don't show us all. Like you can piece it together what he looks like because the bandages will be hanging off in different ways.
Yeah, it's not like a shock when they finally show him full on straight face in the end, but they do it artfully and shot really, really well. This is an instance where the director makes it work so well with the lighting and everything else to where you're never forced to look at it long enough and in bright enough lighting to where you can see any flaw in it. It looks like he's just fucked up. So, Fix It, you wanted to talk about the music stuff.
Very Beetlejuice-ish.
Well, it's Danny
Elfman, yeah.
Who also, of course, did Batman.
Was that music in Batman? Those kind of haunting. I remember Batman 2, The Return of Batman, or Batman Returns, I'm sorry. I remember that distinctive Beetlejuice chorus sound.
Danny Elfman has a wheelhouse for certain, you know, from Simpsons to everything else. I was talking about how I feel like Beetlejuice's peak Elfman is like the most Elfman soundtrack, and most of the stuff he does sounds like some sort of variation on either his Batman themes or his Beetlejuice themes.
Yeah.
This one skews more Batman, but there's still a lot of Beetlejuice flourishes in there as well.
Because he has that la 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 la, which I immediately think of Tim Burton. Yeah. Like, I associate that with Tim Burton, that type of music, because that's in his, you know, Edward Scissorhands and fucking his Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and every fucking movie he makes, it has that little...
Elfman's pretty much in all of Tim Burton's movies, so there's that...
recycled
association there. But what's funny is, obviously, Elfman was very well known for doing the Batman soundtrack, which was a huge success, just like everything else related to that movie. And surely they knew what they were doing when they connected Elfman to Raimi the following year for Darkman. But Raimi and Elfman had a decent run together as well with him scoring his movies. It came to a fine point with Spider-Man 3 because basically Raimi wanted the soundtrack from a Hellraiser movie and was giving Elfman cues from these movies and wanted him to essentially recreate them. And Elfman it completely turned him off, and he was just wanted nothing to do with Raimi for a while there because of that. Just didn't want to speak with each other for a while. I think I heard that they finally resolved that, but at the time Spider-Man 3 came out, they wanted nothing to do with each other. So that's definitely a contrast between the relationship with Elfman and Burton, who, to my understanding, you know, they're constantly working together. So there's that strong association. Now, Mac, you were liking the music, although you thought it was a little oppressive as well.
Yeah, so whenever he's wearing whenever he creates the disguise, he's got 99 minutes, right? 99 minutes before the skin starts to dissolve and go shit. So whenever he's in the guise of one of these dudes, he's constantly checking his stopwatch. So there's this, is he going to accomplish whatever little mission he's doing before the clock runs out? So because of that, they run this really dun 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 like intense music, even though the guy's just like walking up a flight of stairs, because he's slowly walking up the flight of stairs with other people, but that's eating into the time, and then he'll check the clock and you'll see he's got 5 minutes left, and it's dun 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 dun. But it's really heavy music to have over just a group of dudes walking in a room. Like they're doing very mundane things.
Maybe tone it down a little bit.
Maybe tone it, because it's like stressing me out.
Escalate a little bit.
God, I want that music now when I'm at work so I can feel the day just moving along.
Oh my God, it would drive me insane.
Well, I like that he's got a stopwatch that ticks, you know, just to give it that little extra Hitchcockian and like...
A visual. It's definitely a visual. Awesome. Or when every time he takes out the clock, though, like he stares at it. Because even I'm sitting there, I won't lie, the first time he looked at it, I started counting the seconds in my hand to like see if I could keep up with it.
This has such a great video game premise, because you would build whole missions around, can you accomplish this mission in this time frame? It works to the movie's benefit because it helps to propel it even during what would otherwise be mundane scene.
Well, I was just telling Mac here that, so there's a scene where they go to a fun house or a amusement park.
Carnival. Well, I mean, I think it's important to point out that while he's continuing his missions to turn the gang against each other, kill members of the gang, and steal all their money, so that they're not only cash strapped, but also it helps to fund his research and his artificial skins, he's also managed to finally recreate his old face and reconnect with his would-be fiance.
Yeah, but that scene was just phenomenal where they're in the amusement park. She wants to know the truth. He wants to tell her the truth. He keeps disappearing to do
rehab.
Because he's supposed to be in a hospital, and that's how he explains his absence, that he was in a coma, he came out of the coma. The doctors recommend that he not spend too much time away from the hospital. He has to do a bunch of therapy, but he won't go into detail, and she is very suspicious of that.
Oh, she's an attorney, man. She's an attorney. That's like, she's going to dig up the truth.
Yeah. It's like, you all my life, you've been gone for months. You show up at your grave while I'm visiting you.
And you appear to be just perfectly fine.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with you.
So what's
and so, he's trying to explain it. All of a sudden, there's a freak show across the aisle from them where they are displaying this human who has these ailments to his body.
Like, so he looks serpentine.
Yeah, and so that starts to affect him, and he's trying to tell her, and then he decides, no, I'm going to win you a game. Let's play a game.
Well, and also he turns it around to, did you see somebody while I was gone? And
oh, yeah. Well, yes.
He had been comforted by the guy who,
and she thinks that's the whole reason why he keeps disappearing. Yeah.
Well, it's an explanation. Obviously, she knows there's more going on there because that's not enough to satisfy her.
Well, that wasn't even the scene, man. The best scene is, so he throws the baseballs that you're supposed to knock over the milk bottles and win a prize. He does it. The guy tells him, nope, sorry, buddy, you weren't behind the line. He says, I was behind the line. He goes, no, you weren't. And then they do this amazing scene where he's losing his shit and the reality around him starts to crack red. Like his world is just falling apart. And then everything speeds up. The music speeds up. The pacing of the
carnival
movement is pace. Everything's sped up to show you that his heart rate is accelerating. He's about to hulk out. Mm-hmm. And the carny goes to point his fingers in his chest to tell him to fuck off. And he grabs his fingers and just fucking gnarly tears him up. Not even tears him off, just he bends him straight up.
It's like they basically took like an empty glove and he just bent the glove up. Like it's pretty horrendous. And the guy's like, oh, and he's all like, Rah! And the
fiance's screaming too. And so he goes, he grabs the pink elephant and he goes, take the pink elephant. She goes, I don't want it. She goes, take the fucking elephant. And she takes it. She's screaming. He's screaming. All of a sudden his face starts to bubble and I'm just like, oh, that was brilliant. That was fucking brilliant. Brought me back in.
Yeah, he went real crazy. And they do a good job. There's a few things they would do a good job of. So before where he was like really like even keel, ever since he comes back, and even though like, he looks fine and they're out in public, you can tell the way he speaks, he's like a little more manic. Like you can tell his brain's not right. Like he's just like when he talks to her, he's like, and you're like, whoa, dude.
He has a hard time hiding the Irish lilt too. And he wasn't doing a great American accent at the beginning, but now you can really hear the Irish coming through.
Yeah. And what I like too is that, whenever, obviously like when he's playing, whenever he quote unquote has a disguise on, it's just the actor that he's disguised as, right? It's not Liam Neeson in a fucking mask. But so what they do is they like just cake some foundation on them so their real skin looks just a little
off,
fake,
yeah.
Right? And they do the same thing with Liam Neeson. It's Liam Neeson playing Liam Neeson, except he's got, like when he was playing Dr. Giggles.
It looks like he's got foundation on.
But they just have Dr. Giggles just kind of pull at his own cheek, and that's supposed to be like, oh, it's the mask. He's checking on the mask, but it's just a guy pulling on his own skin, and it's like, fucking Dr. Giggles. And so then but here, what they do is he puts like some of the foundation on his lips, so the lips aren't as red as they should be, and it makes it look like it's kind of a mask, but it's not a mask. Like, it's really effective the way they do it. It's kind of cool.
It's those little things.
He looks slightly fake, and that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to look almost real, so they just put like a little layer of makeup on him. It's pretty interesting.
Well, and the acting that goes in that too, because at one point Durant is faced with Durant, and so you've got the actor playing his character and your actor playing Liam Neeson's character playing Durant, and it works because you can see the difference in the two performances, even though it's the same guy and a blue screen.
I think when we watched the special features, he said that was the scene that San Raimi had him perform.
Right,
to see if he could pull it off.
Play the two different characters, and
he said he had so much fun doing it because he got to tone one up and tone one down. I remember that slightly.
As you mentioned, during the carnival sequence, his face starts to bubble because he hung out with her too long. He goes back to his lair. She follows him. She sees his face melt, which is a great effect.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's practical. And she finally realizes what's happened and asks him, why didn't you tell me the truth? I could have helped you. I can still help you, but he refuses to do so. Apparently, there was a lot of tension between Frances McDormand and Sam Raimi on this production. McDormand was already, I don't know if she was married to, I think she's married to Ethan Coen, and the Coen brothers were friends with Raimi, and so she was kind of part of his circle. So he's like, well, yeah, why didn't Fran come and do this movie with me? And she does the movie, but she's a very strong person, and they're putting her in the damsel in distress role. At that point in her career, she was very much fighting against that. She did not want to just be another damsel in distress. Later on in her career, she's just like, I should have just shut up and done the role because that's this type of movie. If I was doing this type of movie, I should have just gone with it. But I personally love it because while it is kind kind of fucked up that she's basically the cause for Peyton Westlake being, brutalized the way that he was, because it was her that was pushing this memorandum issue. It was her that, it was all her bullshit that he ended up suffering for. But I actually think that just adds layers to the movie. It adds complexity. And because she's real, there's at no point where she's like, for starters, she's not sure she wants to marry the guy. When he comes back, she's a little freaked out by it. She confesses while they're talking, if he'd been horribly disfigured, would she be able to accept that? I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's real. That's some real shit there.
And I think I think that those are two really key character points for her. And those are the two I've latched onto the most. The one that she was kind of wishy-washy about wanting to marry to begin with.
Because she put her career first. She wasn't, after, he was the one.
And then when he was like, well, what if I was all, horribly disfigured? She's all like, I don't know about that. And it's like, whoa, dude.
Yeah. But see, it's so great because so often women in these type of movies are all saintly, or they're willing to look past these physical defects. And we don't ask guys to fucking do that shit. There's all kinds of reasons why a guy will drop your ass in one of these fucking movies. So it's nice that, if you had to look at that face with all the fucked up psychological stuff he's going through as well, if you had to deal with that with Eddie Bayless and you're trying to be a successful attorney, that might just be too fucking much for you. And this is an ambitious woman. She's not here to stay at home and tend to some invalid. She's got a fucking career that she's worked hard for, that she's finally advancing in. And she's like, I don't know if I want this bullshit. I don't know if I can handle that. I don't know. This might be too much for me. And that's some real shit. But also, she's attractive, but she's not like the typical babe. She's not Kim Basinger. And I think that she just makes the shit more real because she's a full person in this movie. And she kind of calls him on his bullshit too, because he's fucking lying to her. He's got all these fucking problems he's hiding out from her, and yet he's still trying to restart this relationship with her without being honest with her.
In his defense, though, when he was like, hey, what if I was fucked up? And she's all like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. So he's got to stall until he gets his shit right, because she obviously is not sure. I mean, that's a no. That's basically a no. If it's like, oh, I don't know, that's a no.
Yeah. Well, she did decide. It appeared that she decided she was going to marry the dude, though. So she just had to think about it.
It seemed out of guilt, though.
Well, but when you got to think about it,
But I think that's one of the reasons why this movie resonates for me is both those performers are allowed to be really real with some heavy psychological shit. And this is a fucking superhero movie. And usually they won't let you go to those kind of dark places. I love too, this was back before everybody was so concerned about toys and merchandising. This is R-rated. And you can tell.
Language alone.
I mean, today you could probably get away with most of this stuff because of how far they've pushed PG-13 and because how much more allowance is given for violence versus language and sexual situations. But this movie, not only is it, in terms of the level of violence and the language, but also just the themes. This is some heavy shit. This is way too heavy for, little kids at least, So, I respect that they're willing to go to these places. But I think a lot of that had to do with the actors having integrity. You got Liam Neeson. Is he an Oscar winner? He's at least been nominated, right?
Yeah, you're talking to the wrong person. I've never been a huge Liam Neeson fan.
Right. But you will acknowledge that this is an acclaimed actor with a huge...
Well, he's in some very high-profile franchises, yes.
But here he's young, he's hungry, you're managing him to get that caliber of actor.
I think he just retired from acting and he's just stepping out of retirement.
No, he's still acting. He's retired from action movies, I believe.
Oh, action. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard that motherfucker retire from film 15 different times, so forget that dude.
People do that all the time, yeah. But you wouldn't normally get an actor of that caliber under that kind of makeup. To this day, you won't see that because they know how fucking arduous it is. But back then, he was young and hungry, and he did it, and I think that he's able to convey stuff
those prosthetics on his face could not have been fun to endure every single freaking day. And to act through, and because you should explain, even the teeth. Like, he's got a crazy, dental thing going on to have his teeth all jacked up like that. I mean, that's, a lot of actors would be like, I'm passing on this, no thanks.
Right.
Unless it was for a Marvel movie.
But even then, if it's not one of the major characters, I may not want to fool with that stuff. But I think he learned the same lesson that the Planet of the Apes actors learned. He figured out how to overact so that he can penetrate that disguise. It's so hard to see the human being underneath all those layers of latex, but he conveys that extremely well. And it's necessary because some of the movie is showing his psychology, the damage that's been done to this man. While we're talking, though, let's discuss some race shit that's going on in this movie. Can we talk about the race shit that's going on in this movie?
Are we talking about the Asians?
Hung fat. Oh, Honorable Durant, I cannot give you your money today. My servants are not performing, and the white powder is just not doing what it used to do. It's like, man, this is some fucking dated ass racial bullshit here. How about the Latino gangster that's working with them? With his, it looks like they cake on the brown to make him browner.
No, man.
Plus, he's got the fucking scar and shit. Come on, we gotta talk about this shit.
It's a movie of its time period. I'm not gonna bash on it because that was acceptable at the time.
Even the Asian stuff?
Robert, so good of you to favor me with your venerated presence.
The money.
The money. Yes, Robert. How I tremble with shame. I have no money.
Yeah, that was acceptable at that time. I mean, I'm sure if you watch...
Look, man, it's all...
Dude, you watch Bruce Lee films from the late 70s, and man, they would be considered very offensive today. But it's just, they were films of their period. I mean, you can't judge them.
Like racial epithets on
Yeah, they're not like, they're not straight out. Yes, they're playing up stereotypical characters, but they're not straight out being racist. I can't. You're just a little stretching on that one, buddy.
If you say so. I do think, though, that they playing into the racial stereotypes also gives it that pulp 1930s feel that they're deriving a lot of this material from. Because he owes as much to the Shadow, the Spider, as he does to Batman, for instance.
Yeah.
So Sam Raimi's a comic book fan. He grew up on like Spider-Man, which is one of the reasons why I love doing those movies so much. I have to wonder, watching this movie, if he didn't read some old Adam comic too. Because the relationship between Peyton and Julie is very similar to what we had with Ray Palmer and Jean Loring, where she's a lawyer, she's career first. And so in the comics, the Adam tries to help Jean Loring in her law career so that she'll get advanced enough to where she's willing to go ahead and marry him and start a family. In this, the whole movie is really driven by Julie's decisions, Julie's work, because she's the reason why Peyton gets blown up in the first place. She's the reason why Peyton's trying to come back from all that stuff that happened to him and try to become the man that he used to be. Julie starts up the relationship with the real estate developer guy, who it turns out she finds the Belisarius memorandum because of it had a distinctive coffee stain on it. And so she finally realizes that the real estate guy was working with Durant the whole time and got her fiance killed, or would-be fiance killed. So she goes back to tell Peyton what she's discovered, leading the gangsters to him for the big confrontation between Peyton and the gang. So as Mac pointed out, everything in this movie is Julie's fault, but she's also driving almost everything that happens in the movie.
Yeah, she's just, it's just one fuck up after another for her. She's like, because before she realized the real estate dude was crooked, she's all like, Peyton's back. Oh my God, he's back and he's da-da-da. And it's like, why would you go just, she's like, because I can't see you anymore because Peyton's back. But then
clearly underselling the relationships, that she was like, oh, he meant nothing to me, he just offered me some comfort.
Right, but then she has to break up with him, basically. Right. It's like, well, okay. And then they all go south from there.
She caught that D, we know.
Right. And then, but that's when she sees the memorandum after that. And so then now she finds like, oh, I just told the bad guy that he's the one who's been fucking everything up for them. So,
and then
she goes straight to him, so they just follow her. It's, yeah, anyway.
So how about that action sequence?
The helicopter scene?
Yeah, all of it.
That was good. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Terrible. I'm starting to lose it in this movie.
Okay, so I think we have to break it up into two sections. The plant, where they're rolling up the textile plant.
Better.
What did you like and dislike about that?
I liked how he was using the masks to, like, he put the mask on the Hispanic dude to trick the other dude into shooting him. That stuff was kind of cool.
I thought that they did good explosives work, and I think they got a lot of use out of his theatrical cape because he's constantly swirling around and he's going down rails.
It was kind of brutal, though, when he's beating up on the long-haired guy and he's just like,
just
punching him.
Because they're doing you can watch the fist coming at the camera as he's bah, bah, and they cut to them like reeling in pain.
Blood splattering. He's just wailing the shit out of him. So that was a little brutal.
Yeah, and I like the rooftop where the dude's shooting the grenade launcher at him instead of a pistol or something like that. That was cool.
Yeah, it's cool. He has the tilted backwards to load each grenade, so you got kind of a cool little motion there. And of course, he's shooting from a helicopter, which leads into the helicopter sequence where Peyton latches onto the side of the helicopter, manages to jump on, which actually does sort of happen. Liam Neeson was attached to the side of the helicopter. They went up. They were supposed to go up like 10 feet is what they told him. They ended up going like 60 plus feet in the air, and he's afraid of heights. So at first he was, fine, punching Durant and fighting, and then he looks down and he completely froze. And I think that's from everything from there is like blue screen and stunt doubles.
Yeah, so he basically falls from the helicopter, and there's like a strap and a hook that he falls and holds onto. And then, Dr. Giggles was like, let's shake him. So the both of them just flying around the town trying to shake him off the helicopter. And it's just, this is so 90s shit. I feel like in the 90s was like the fucking heyday for helicopter stunts. Where every fucking action movie had to have some dude hanging from a fucking helicopter or holding on to the landing gear of a helicopter, some shit like that. It's just an opportunity opportunity to have one helicopter filming another helicopter, and ooh, it's a helicopter, so it kind of freaks people out. So he's basically just swinging from the bottom of this helicopter, and you can't attach somebody to a fucking airplane or something, so it's where you can do stuff in the air, and it looks probably more impressive than it really is.
Smashed through office buildings and running on trucks, and the grenades were being fired at the freeway.
He's smashing him into an office building. He's, I don't know, he makes some dumb line, and then he gets sucked. Yeah, pardon me, or pardon my mess, or whatever. And then it yanks him out, and then he gets dropped too close to some trucks, and he's like running, but he's running at like super speed, so they speed it up. And every time they show him, it's obviously him in front of a blue screen, and then they'll do a large panned out shot of a helicopter flying and a guy who obviously is stunt double hanging at the bottom, and then like a police helicopter's following him, and it's another excuse to show a long pan of two helicopters flying close to each other, and then they cut back to Darkman swinging around on the hook, horribly blue screen, and then now he's in traffic and he gets hit by a car, and it's just
not just any car, Mr. Fix-It.
Yeah, it was San Raimi's famous, what is it?
I think it's a Pontiac. They call it the classic. It's the Ash car.
Yeah, the Ash car.
Ash Williams from Evil Dead, and a whole bunch of spin-off stuff.
Where does it go from there? This was all like this sequence was way too long. Way too long.
This is their big action spectacle. This is like the last big set piece.
But
it
wasn't. It was all blue screen.
Mm-hmm. Well, they were really flying helicopters around Los Angeles, which you could not do today.
And then it gets.
And they did really I don't know. They didn't drag an actual helicopter into the underpass that depicted in the movie, which kills Durant, the big bad of the movie. But they did drag something through an actual LA tunnel, causing some damage, and basically LA shut that shit down from it going forward. So they ruined it for everyone.
So they should have cut 3 minutes of the middle out, because the ending was fine, where he hooks it to a big rig, and so the helicopter can't fly up, and it basically pulls it into the tunnel. That's fine. I got no problem with that. It was all the hokey stuff in the middle they probably needed to cut out. And I didn't mind him shooting the grenade launcher, because it's just complete action movie
big
excess.
Michael Bay kind of thing.
Yeah, whereas instead of trying to
lots
shoot
of casualties in this movie.
Instead of shooting a pistol at Darkman, trying to kill him hanging off, instead he's shooting his grenade launcher, trying to pinpoint the dude.
But it's directly underneath him, so he can't quite.
So instead he's hitting traffic and bridges all around him. All that was fine, but that needed to be cut a little bit.
And see, I'd argue that the big goofy comedy moments kind of help to mitigate how brutal the movie is. The movie is fairly sadistic at times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I recall that reviewers took issue with how violent the movie was. How brutal it was.
It's kooky and sadistic.
Yeah, and that's just it. The kookiness helps to offset that. You got kind of this light goofy.
It's also a little off-putting. I think it's a little off-putting too. So I could totally see how normal viewers would be like, "What?" Like the clown scene with the kooky clown music, and then he literally bends a dude's fingers 180 degrees backwards as he loses his mind and goes crazy. Like, to me, that's like it spells cult classic, but there's no way a mainstream audience would think that they would have walked out by now.
Yeah, but the movie got the budget that it did get because Batman had done so well, and this was already in the pipeline. So it's like, well, let's throw some money at this movie. Let's promote it like they did Batman. Everybody acknowledges the movie made the money that it did because of how good the promotion was. They had this whole campaign of who is Darkman, great trailers, and of course those wonderful print ads. So, but yeah, they were chasing that Batman dollar. But you do have this conflict between the creative vision, which is much more gonzo, and the desired financial rewards that could have come from biting Batman's act.
I just don't understand where the fucking helicopter came from. It had to just be we have budget money to rent a helicopter, so let's fucking rent a helicopter. Because to me, there could have been a million different ways he finally got Dr. Giggles out of this movie, and instead he kills him in a helicopter. Like this dude has been.
It's been impersonal.
Shouldn't he have cut his fingers off, or shouldn't he? Well, it's like why doesn't this dude get what's coming to him?
Back at the factory, Peyton sets up the exact circumstance under which he was blown up.
Right.
And you see the drinking crow and the lighter, and then they have a little twist to it. And so that feels like a poetic justice moment, but it's just one of the bullshit underlings.
It's one of the bullshit guys he gets, not Durant. I know that was the exact same thing I was thinking while I was watching that. I'm like, why is the slappy guy who was shooting the fake leg, why is he the one who gets duped into, like you said, the poetic justice finale?
Did I miss them killing the fake leg guy? I don't remember seeing him get by it yet. He's like the one guy, right, that's left that they haven't killed off yet?
I don't know.
Look like hell, Robert. That son of a bitch Westlake malfunctioned my helicopter.
How terrible for you.
He's a cockroach. You think you kill him, and he pops up someplace else.
I expect he'll pop up here soon. See, I know how he thinks. I don't think the world will grieve over one less attorney.
Okay, who wants to close out the movie?
Mac?
Okay, so they go to the... So after they crash Dr. Giggles in the helicopter, they fast forward to the construction site where he's building the new city of the future or whatever, right?
Well, and let's go ahead and point out that Raimi is from Michigan, the city that... This is obviously L.A. There's no way you can get around. The filming obviously takes place in L.A., but I believe it's supposed to... Didn't you guys say it was set in Detroit?
Well, it looked like that was the...
Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Beginning, but...
And what else is set in Detroit?
RoboCop.
And what is the big plot behind RoboCop?
The exact same plot as this movie.
Which is?
We're trying to build a new city, so we're dealing with criminals so that they can take care of our dirty work, and a good guy gets in the way of that, and
in a pretty severe way, yeah.
And he's in a violent way transformed into our hero. Which one came out? RoboCop was 84?
RoboCop was 87, this was 90. So, yeah. I think that until you guys mentioned it, I didn't catch the similarities, and then once you mentioned it, you could not see the similarities.
Yeah, oh no, that was from the moment we started, I'm like, wow, this is very RoboCop, like, you know, the Alex Murphy protocol is in effect.
I'm going to continue with the recap. Yeah. Okay, so we're at the construction site. Evil realtor guy is there, and he meets up with Dr. Giggles, and that's
and he's got Julie in tow at gunpoint, handcuffed with a... Does she have the gag over her mouth already? Yeah, right?
So they hop into an elevator, and he's like, oh, he really fucked up my helicopter, but I survived. Even though we all know it's fucking Darkman and the prosthetic, right?
He did at least put some battle damage on his figure, though.
So then they go up the elevator to the top, and they're walking on the metal I-beams, and the realtor dude's talking about... By the way,
did anybody else get flashbacks to Runaway during that?
No, because I've never seen it.
A little bit with Magnum PI?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, except you need the little robot spiders that are everywhere, yeah.
So, hey, everybody, welcome to Runaway Podcast. No, the guy's going on about how, my dad used to bring me up here to the construction site, which is me and the Indians, because we're the only ones crazy enough to work up here and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, whatever.
High-speed winds, I would just jump around.
5 inches wide, 5 inches wide, 650 feet high. So he's kind of sort of dancing on these I-beams, and he makes an offhanded comment. He's like, I'm really glad you survived back there. I'd hate to have their kids grow up without their father or whatever. And he was like, yes, they really look up to me. And then later on, that's where the turn is later on. He's like, hey, Durant or Robert or whatever. He's like, you don't have any kids. He turns around and he snatches the mask off Darkman's face.
Did you guys catch the gay subtext on Durant?
No.
The actor Larry Drake was playing him gay. And there's little tells throughout the movie. I didn't catch it when I saw the movie myself, but once I heard it, I caught it. He really liked Ted Raimi's character.
Well, yeah, they joked about that.
Oh, the scene where he jerked him off.
Right. And they make these little notes like, you're supposed to know he doesn't have kids because he doesn't go that way. I know he likes Ted, that one in the bar scene.
He really likes Ted.
Right. So what you can see it now, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the scene where he was jerking him off. Also. Okay, well, no, but now that makes some sense.
Yeah.
This is terrible quote-unquote fight scene where Darkman is just wobbling on these beams going, whoa, and then I'll fall forward and go, whoa.
I think if you watch the movie, though, he fights like a scientist for most of the movie. He's a grappler. He grabs you, and then the super strength and the hulking out kicks in, and he can do some damage. But he's not really great with the fisticuffs. Unless he surprises you, somebody who can handle himself can take him on. And this dude,
but there's there's like a scene where they pull back to show them both on these beams, and they're both just wobbling back and forth trying to catch their balance. And I'm like, yeah, okay, we get it. They're up high. Well,
I think in the actual filming they were up high because I think somebody actually got injured because they fell 10 feet or something off of these fake I-beams.
10 feet.
No, but I mean, talk about it in real life though.
Okay, well then why the fuck is there so much green or blue screen if they were really up high? That's all it is.
The rest of the building.
There's a lot of like off balance fighting, and there's another goon, and he falls, and then she falls.
So was he the one-legged guy or no? They never got rid of the one-legged guy, huh?
I don't know. He might have got killed in the factory. I don't know. Yeah, then there's all sorts of like.
Oh, you know what? No, they didn't, because I remember now from the special features he got killed in the factory and he got cut, so we never actually see him die. So they made this joke about he could still turn up one of these days.
So yeah, it's just your normal like high-rise fight battle where dudes are catching their balance and falling, and then they fall and catch themselves on something, and she falls.
They fall. Her
handcuffs get caught on some rebar, and that kind of stuff.
The kind of stuff you'd expect. Yeah.
Culminates into dude. Oh, he's holding dude by the leg. He's like, "You're not gonna kill me."
Well, don't forget that he's running around shooting the
the rivet gun. He starts shooting rivet guns at him, and he rivets his hand. Rivets his hand to an I-beam, and then he's all like, he calls him a freak. He's like, "You're just a freak," and that's when he goes a freak. That's when he has his Hulk out moment. And they do another one of the
and suddenly he can fight
Hulk out montages, and he rips his hand through the rivet and something. Then now all of a sudden he can fight. And then he's holding him. He's like, I know you. You can't kill me. It's not in your DNA to kill me or whatever. And then he closes his eyes and lets him go, and he kills him.
Yeah, because they did do a decent job throughout the movie of showing that he was having real serious doubts about what was happening to him, that he was able to commit these heinous murders, essentially, these executions of the criminals. But when he hulks out, he can't control himself and he deuces them. So I think in this circumstance, what it was is he had hulked out, but he was starting to, the real estate guy was trying to calm him down so he could fuck with his head and make him feel guilty. And they probably should have made some mention of, "You're not going to kill me in front of Julie, are you? She'd never forgive you." But they didn't go there for some reason randomly. But he could. He closes his eyes and he drops him and he lands on the spikes, of course.
And then they do a elevator ride back down where he basically explains, "Look, what was his name?
Peyton Westlake.
Peyton's dead. I'm just Darkman. Peace out." And then he puts on a mask and he
what's funny too is he didn't want her to look at him, and she insists, "I want to look at you." So he turns and she has this gas moment where I think you could hear her pussy dry up.
Literally the sound of all the moisture out of there.
At least some of it was on his face. He was damp. He got a workout apparently.
Well, now you're going too far. So basically after that she runs out of the elevator and all of a sudden it's daylight. It was really weird.
Yeah, the sun came up really quick.
And she's like grabbing different dudes in the street going, "Peyton, Peyton, Peyton," and they're all just like dudes. And then we see the real Peyton, but not real Peyton, and he turns and the mask he put on is Bruce Campbell. Everybody knows Bruce Campbell.
Hail to the chief, baby.
Ash Williams.
And he's all like, "I'm fucking Darkman," and he walks off.
I like that little subtle bit there at the end because apparently Raimi wanted Bruce Campbell, since they worked together on all these movies and they were buddies, they're lifelong friends. They're co-executive producers on all the Evil Dead stuff that you still see today. But the studio wasn't into Bruce Campbell. He had never proven himself to them. So they wanted somebody with a little bit more bankability. I don't know that Liam Neeson was that bankable in 1990, but he had some familiarity. He'd done some projects and they just felt more comfortable going outside of Raimi's little circle. I do think the movie might have been stronger with Bruce Campbell. I do think the physical stuff would have definitely been stronger because I think he's proven he's basically a stuntman as well as an actor with all the stuff that he had to go through in the Evil Dead movies.
But then it would have just been Ash and not really Darkman.
I don't know though. I don't know if that's true because
I'm picturing that carnival scene where they even have sort of the almost fisheye lens in his face as he's freaking out and going crazy. To me, that's like a scene from the Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And if that would have been Ash's face, it would have been
just Ash playing Darkman.
I think you make a good point. I do think that Liam Neeson is a better Peyton Westlake. I'm not sure that Bruce Campbell wouldn't be a better Darkman though.
Other than the fact that he's like 6'5". He's
really that tall? I didn't know.
Liam Neeson's a huge
Liam Neeson's
dude.
tall. Yeah,
Liam Neeson's a big dude.
Yeah.
So
he definitely, and you can tell he towers over people.
Yeah, he's way
That's why
bigger
when they
than
try to double him, it's tricky because he's probably taller than
next to
himself.
what's her name, he like tower. Oh my god!
And Francis McDormand is not small to my recollection either. But I think that because when he was playing Briscoe County, I think that was a very different character from Ash Williams. So I think he's able to shift gears. But I think you're right too. When he's doing the manic stuff, he would suddenly turn into Ash Williams. That could be a problem. So yeah. But it was a nice little nod. And if they had done sequels, I really wish they had done some actual theatrical sequels. It would have been nice to have seen Bruce Campbell do that. But I think that they went straight into Army of Darkness after this, and I think that was his priority there.
So I'm assuming Liam Neeson was not in the sequels.
No.
They were direct to video.
Sure, he was doing like Rob Roy by then or something like that.
Yeah. Who did the sequel?
Dr. Giggles was in them.
Dr. Giggles was in one of them. He was in one of them, the sequels. But do you remember who played Dr. Peyton Westlake in the DTV movies?
No, I don't remember that.
Arnold Vosloo. Remember Arnold Vosloo? The Mummy? I thought you were right.
Oh, yeah, you're right. We did watch that. That's right.
Because wasn't Arnold Vosloo the guy that Wizard Magazine cast for every bald person whenever they did one of their roll calls?
Probably.
Yeah. So I thought you might recognize the name because of that. Puck. I don't think he was Professor X, but he did play a bunch of bald dudes, like maybe Apocalypse at some point.
That sounds right.
So what do we think about the movie?
It was better than I was expecting, but I do think that last act really turned me off.
It's so strong at the beginning.
Yeah.
It does wear out its welcome a little bit.
Honestly, you know what? And I made this joke earlier, but it really thought the movie reminded me of it because there's so many similar settings. It reminds me of Ang Lee's Hulk. There's a lot of really unique transitions, and it's really a different way to look at a comic book movie. And there's a lot of science shit. You did your science earlier, just like we did in the Hulk podcast.
Much more successfully here, though, I believe.
Way more successfully. I felt like the transitions fit the scenes as opposed to I felt that Ang Lee came up with some cool transitions and then worked a movie around it. I didn't burn burn out on them in this movie, but I just thought it was just really well shot, and every scene had some kind of different angle to it, or something that kind of made you think like, whoa, like even in the beginning where they're smashing Liam Neeson's head into these different cabinets, they're glass-faced cabinets, but when they smash his face into it, so they show the guy pulling his head back, but when he smashes through, they've got the camera inside the cabinet, so he comes through his face comes through the glass at the camera. Like, little stuff like that is just a little bit different.
When the rivet gun's being fired, you get rivet POV as it's shooting at Peyton Westlake.
Yeah, well, okay, sure.
You didn't like that?
I mean, I guess it was kind of cool. To me, all of that ran out in the last act, and the last act was sort of just
that. And I thought
green
that was
screen
so
bullshit
close
fighting.
to the eyeball scene in Evil Dead 2 that it's like, oh, you're doing the eyeball sequence. Okay, so
in the last act, there's just no space for cool transitions and cool. It's really just sort of
they seem to have run out of
fights
gas
and helicopter shit.
They just kind of ran out of energy.
Yeah, and I really felt that where they could have been as creative as they were in the first 3 quarters of the movie, in the last quarter, instead it was really just kind of a bullshit
action movie,
helicopter chase, and then a fight scene on a building.
I think a lot of what makes Darkman unique is how much of the internal stuff is being shown.
Yeah.
What's going on inside Peyton, where the action sequences at the end are very external. It's all about him fighting people. He's much better at dancing with a funnel on his head, pretending to be the Tin Man or the Scarecrow, depending on, the dance moves are definitely Scarecrow. He's much better at that than he is at the action stuff at that point in his career. I think Raimi as well.
Well, and I think so this, and that was what I don't. I'm still just. I really think that the end of the movie should have been he blows up Dr. Giggles the way Dr. Giggles blew him up, or some sort of, like you said, the poetic justice.
Callback, yeah.
This movie was setting itself up for a poetic justice ending, right? I mean, that's how all these movies are, and I think that Raimi could have done something really psychological with it and been like, oh shit, that's really fucked up the way he finally got his revenge on these guys, and really, like, the revenge is so weak sauce.
Dropping off the building, yeah.
And again,
and the fact that
his
he's
whole
fighting a guy who, while ultimately is responsible for his condition, the personal enmity isn't set up for him.
They've never met the whole movie, and
it's been him versus Durant, and so when Durant's gone, you're like, we're still doing this.
So his shtick is obviously it's not fighting. He has super strength and he has no nerves, but that's never his shtick throughout the movie. The shtick is that he assumes these people's identities, and you get that a little bit with him taking Durant's identity in the end. But then they blow his cover in like 5 seconds. Yeah. So you know what I mean? It was sort of like, that was his whole thing.
That might be part of the deal, though, is that they've essentially, when they unmask him, they depower him. He no longer has the subterfuge. He no longer has that all he has, and he's not wanting to Hulk out in front of Julie. So it's like he's at his most vulnerable. I think that's what they were shooting for. I don't think it quite works.
Think they got
but I see where they were trying to. I kind of see where they were trying to go for that. So.
No, I got that they unmask him. He now has to be. He has to accept that he's Darkman.
Where he disappears in the midst of a construction site where there's nothing to hide behind. It's like, when did you turn into a ninja? Okay, wait, what? That was a little.
And then like when he swing on the hook to go save her, and it just looks so bad. And so much of this movie, and some of that stuff I don't understand.
Blue screen strikes. Blue screen really takes over there at the end, and it hurts.
And it's doing stuff that you don't need a blue screen for.
Yeah.
Well, what the fuck did you need a blue screen for? Some of that stuff. I guess some of the helicopter stuff.
If you're going to do Luke and Leia going across the chasm, I don't remember them using a blue screen then either. That painting actually swinging, and you're blue screening the swing. It's just
it's like you're telling me they're 650 feet up in the air. We know they're actually not. So I get it. If there's a cityscape in the background, you got a blue screen the cityscape, but the rest of it you don't need to. The rest of it's kind of shot from underneath. You're seeing stars in the background.
I do like that John Galt moment though, where he's talking about, I built this city, and the camera managed to pan in such a way where you go from the night sky to the actual city that he's building. I built it all.
Yeah,
that was a nice little bit, but it's not. It doesn't save kind of a weak final act.
Yeah, and again, like you said, Durant's the bad guy.
Right.
This realtor dude is he's like a total limp dick. Like I don't really know what they don't do anything to make us build the hate up for him throughout this movie as much as we hate Dr. Giggles. Dr. Giggles is the one who fucks with everybody. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if anything, I feel like Dr. Giggles should have killed that dude at some point, and then you know what I mean? Like
you just want to see more of him because he has such a great presence, and he is the malicious force throughout this movie. And instead, you've got this douchebag
he's so reckless. Like, of course, he would be the one to kill his own boss, right? Like, I feel like it's totally something that he would have done. The dude looks at him wrong, and he just goes off and starts firing a grenade launcher at people. He totally would have killed his boss.
The realtor guy should have been the Miguel Ferrer character in RoboCop. Actually, but it is similar to RoboCop too, because remember the final confrontation? It's Ronnie Cox, and the Ed 209. And it's like, but the guy that we cared about was Kirkwood Smith. He's already gone. So RoboCop actually had a similar fuck up, but they managed to gloss gloss over it better because it was still a cool, sardonic ending. This one doesn't go there. This movie is too sincere, and so you don't have the punch in the ending that RoboCop had.
Yeah. So I was vibing pretty good with the movie for the first 2/3 or 3/4. The ending is just so meh.
Yeah. And what about you, Fix?
Same for me. I enjoyed the first half of the movie, and then at the end they just ran out of gas. They added another villain. He had the Spider-Man 3 problem where you add another villain that you didn't really need. Like, we didn't need the evil real estate guy.
You needed to resolve the relationship with Julie, but the tacked on last action sequence could have been done without.
Yeah, I didn't particularly care for that. So
yeah, I see where you're coming from. For me, what I love about the movie,
or like I was saying, this movie's so sadistic. Fuck these dudes up. Like, what are you just dropping dudes off a building and you blow another guy up in a helicopter? What if you go through all the trouble of him?
Well, like one of the best,
especially with Dr. Giggles. Dr. Giggles. They even go through a point of being in his house and show that he's like a semi-taxidermy, where he's taxidermying the fingers
that he cuts off people and stuff. Yeah, do something with that.
Where's this dude's comeuppance? He just crashes that helicopter after all the other fucked up shit you're doing in this movie. I mean, you wouldn't have been pushing it too far. You've already gone. It's already rated R. You've already gone far with it.
And then the residential, and then the guy, the real estate mogul at the end, where he's like, "Well, you know, my wife, I took her out. Something about he landed and she didn't." And I'm just like,
he killed her off to get her money or something.
So they're trying to make him evil. That's like their quick way of, oh, by the way, he's evil because he killed his wife.
Yeah, but really before that, he was just a real estate guy trying to pull some
scumbag,
some crooked deals to get some land done.
He was such a smarmy guy to begin with. You know this guy's dirty, and yet you're going to shack up with him. So again, it goes back to Jules being kind of fucked up and fucking a lot of shit up because she's fucked up.
Yeah. Sorry.
But I love the movie because so many superhero movies up to that point felt compromised. It felt like guys who convey some of the iconography of comics, but they were movie people first. And so there was a sort of apologetic quality to their movie presentations. Even Donner was very sincere in his presentation, but the Donner movie owed a lot to the TV show, more so than the comic books. And then Tim Burton made movies about the villains. He wasn't a great Batman director. He was a great Joker director. He was a great Catwoman director, Penguin director. Not a great Batman director. Batman did not get a proper movie really until the Christopher Nolan's, not counting the 66 movie, which definitely is a Batman movie, but I'm talking about like a serious take. So for me, this was the only 90s style superhero movie made in the 90s with that 90s flavor that had that kinetic energy, that had that kind of cutting where it felt like it was modern. It felt like somebody who had understood the language of comics and was able to communicate that onto the screen for the first time. This was my favorite comic book movie for a long time. This came out in 90. The first superhero movie to make me question whether or not this was my favorite arguably isn't a superhero movie. Some people claim The Matrix as a superhero movie. I don't. I think it's a live action anime. But if I do prefer The Matrix to this movie, and then a number of years later when you get to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, particularly The Avengers is when I finally knew this is my new favorite superhero movie. I loved Darkman for almost 20 years, more than 20 years before Avengers came out. It was my favorite superhero movie. Not necessarily my favorite comic book movie because I prefer Ghost World, and that came out earlier than that, for instance.
What about Superman?
I prefer Darkman to Superman.
Over, really?
Yes. I preferred it over Batman's movies. I preferred it over Superman's movies up to the point of the Avengers coming out.
First Avenger, though.
The Avenger. No, I don't know if I like the first Avenger better than I like Darkman.
Oh, really?
I love Captain America. I still had some reservations about the first Captain movie. There's stuff about it I love and stuff about it I still have some issues with. So disputably, but definitely by the time I saw Avengers, like, okay, this is definitely my new favorite superhero movie, regardless of any conflict between Darkman and Captain America, the first Avenger, Darkman versus Batman Returns, which is another one I loved a lot. But it also was hobbled by it being a Tim Burton movie first and a comic book movie second. But I love the shit out of Darkman. I love that energy that it had. And it took a long time before comic movies caught up to Darkman. So of course I always wanted to see sequels. I wanted to see them do more with this. Obviously the follow-ups were somewhat underwhelming, although we'll touch on that later on. But I do like the Darkman concept. I do think that he works on that Blade level where he's a more human, more street level kind of character. The stakes have to be lowered because of that. But because of the brutality, because of the horror trappings, because you have to figure out who Darkman is after this, because he's got his revenge. So you got to figure out, well, if he's not doing it for the love of Jules, if he's not doing it for revenge, why is he continuing to be Darkman? What is he looking for? What is he trying to find out? And I think that would be an interesting series of movies to do. They never do that in the sequels. They never give him a reason for continuing to be Darkman. He just keeps doing it because of circumstances. But I do think there's enough in this character. He's such a great melange of influences, all that pulp stuff, all the horror stuff. There's just a lot there to work with. And I'm not sure how successful anybody has been with trying to do that. I really wish Raimi had gone back, or he could still go back. I think I'd love to see Raimi try to do this movie again. Or given how well I thought that Fed Alvarez did at remaking Evil Dead, turn him loose on a Darkman remake. But I really feel like it's time for them to go back to Darkman, because I think there's just a lot of potential with this character. He does have a cult following. I do worry. I do think the culture's moved past him, and I don't know that if they don't do something with him soon, I don't know that he's going to be remembered, because I think that legacy is being erased by the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's so good. It works so well that it's just not comparable to those movies anymore. I love it still. I thoroughly enjoy watching this movie again, but it's not comparable. It can't compete with those movies anymore. So I'd love to see them try to go back and do a hard R horror superhero action pulp movie like this again.
Yeah, I don't see how Netflix couldn't get Sam Raimi to come in and make a Darkman miniseries.
Yeah,
or,
maybe not Raimi, maybe executive produce it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think there's any shortage of platforms if he wanted to do it. It's got to just be him wanting to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and having the time to. They're constantly working on other stuff. I mean, they just wrapped up Ash vs. the Evil Dead. And, he's got stuff going on too. I don't remember the last thing Raimi directed though. What was the last thing he's done? I don't think I've seen anything he's done since Drag Me to Hell, which I enjoyed, but I watched it one time in the theater and I've never revisited it. Because I remember everybody was hailing it as a return of the master to horror, and then I can't remember a thing he's done since then.
Should I Google that real quick?
Sure, let's do.
Specifically director. Internet save us. One episode of Ash vs. Evil. You looking for movies though?
Well, it doesn't matter. I know he directed the pilot to Ash vs. Evil Dead, which was awesome. The first season of that show was great.
And Powerful.
That's right. I don't watch those movies, so he did do that. Yeah. Anything since then though?
The Black Giandola.
Is that a movie
short
coming out? Okay.
It's a horror short about zombies apparently. World War III, sci-fi action. I don't know if this is going to be a movie or not.
So everything that he's got is pre-production right now then, I take it.
Yeah. And the King Killer Chronicle.
So the last thing was the Oz movie with James Franco. And that was a while back, right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
2013, that's 5 years.
Jeez.
Because math.
Raimi these days.
Do some Darkman shit.
Darkman.
Just swimming in money.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about this guy's long-term prospects though? Do you think this guy's got a life in him, or do you think that his time has passed? What do you think about the look? What do you think about the powers? The world?
It's gonna be a no for me, dog.
No?
I don't think anybody gives a shit about a dude who wears makeup and pretends to be other people.
What about on TV?
It's gonna be a no for me, dog.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I mean, I think it would be fine for a miniseries remaking this, but like you said, after this is over with, what the fuck? What is his
motivation?
He just motivates, like, so he just fights crime, but he fights crime by witnessing a crime and then going and impersonating those people and gets revenge on them later on. Like, what the fuck? Like, the powers don't lend themselves to active crime fighting.
That's a good point.
I mean, if maybe he wants to infiltrate, but
Al Qaeda.
I don't know about Al Qaeda. I guess
you get really hot.
Tom Clancy's Darkman.
Tom Clancy's Darkman.
You can get Dwight from The Office to be Darkman. Yeah, I'm not saying somebody more creative than me couldn't figure it out, but like you said, this is a very Crow-like story where the Crow goes.
Clearly, Alex Proyas borrowed a lot from this too.
I mean, he's going to go off and it's the redemption / revenge of his death, and then once it's over, he can't go back to his old life because of his mangled or he's actually dead.
Yeah.
But once he's gotten revenge on all the people who put him in the situation he's in, I don't know what. I mean,
what's his deal now?
What does he goes to become a doctor in a burn ward, and then I don't know.
And freak out on people and get fired from being a doctor in a burn ward. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he can't. He's the dude's fucking unstable as shit. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What about you, Mr. Fix-It?
If they did do a reboot, it'd be more nostalgic. I don't think.
Well, I mean, I think you'd have to rejigger it to make it
Mac
work.
makes a very good point. His powers do not really play into being a revenge guy, yes, but not a hero. I mean, he can't go out there and stop the crime with it. It just doesn't make any sense. It'd be great. Now, if they played him up as an anti-hero, more of a villain, then yeah, it makes sense. I mean, all of a sudden he's Zartan from fucking G.I. Joe and shit, where he's like morphing into other people and doing things. But I mean, unless you're gonna have him like some fucking eco guy that he's impersonating the CEO of Exxon and shit to get him to stop doing bad shit.
He's gonna combat global warming now.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, that makes
no
sense.
He wants global warming. Make it dark all the time.
Oh, right.
What a twist.
Highlander 2
What
world.
a twist.
He the ozone layer prevention.
He needs some fallout up there.
So yeah, I just don't see, you do a 3-part miniseries where
he obviously moves to Alaska
where it's dark,
where the
all the
nights
time.
are really long or whatever. Yeah, where it's dark all the time.
So it goes from 99 minutes to like all day long, except for there's an hour window where his skin will melt, so he has to watch that 24th hour.
Yeah, man, I don't know, dude. So anyway, sorry.
How
about the look at least? Is it too basic?
No, I thought he looks great.
He's just kind of a riff off of the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, it's very Phantom of the Opera, mummy sort of.
You have one half of his face,
bandages.
You have one of his half his face is deformed where the mask would go over, and he's wearing the cape. So he's just the Phantom of the Opera look. So
okay, well, I love Darkman. It doesn't always translate.
No, I don't think it was a bad movie. I was surprised.
You're just bukkaking hate all over this film, man.
I was surprised how good it was, but like I said, I don't know where this goes from here, though. I don't know how you could do an ongoing.
And that's the thing. They've done some comics, but not a lot. They weren't terribly successful. They've done movies, but not a lot. They weren't terribly successful. They tried to do a TV show. We'll get into that. We'll see how well that works.
He's like the A-Team where when shit goes wrong, you try to find him. And if he takes your case, then he'll work backwards.
Yeah, I guess you could do that.
For a dude that looks like...
Hey, dude, I'm trying to throw you a bone here. I'm throwing you a bone.
I love it when a plan comes together.
This is the story of an outcast. My story. I had everything once until it was all taken away and I became the Darkman. I'd found a way to replace damaged skin tissue, but the skin didn't last. Nothing lasts when you get in the way of Robert G. Durant.
No heroics, please.
Vincenzo, Durant's enforcer. They came to steal my formula for synthetic skin. Durant plagues this city. Controls it from the mayor down to the cops on the street. Julie, my wife, she died in the explosion. But I survived. My nerves severed so I could feel no physical pain. Nothing. Except the adrenaline rush of a raging bull. But I summoned the will to go on, watching over his city, waiting for revenge as the world crumbled around me, leaving only the rich and the wretched. Homeless children, turning the city into their playground.
It's a Prince song.
Yeah, it's Get Off.
Yeah. But they keep playing that one part over and over. They're just not.
Yeah, this is probably temp music they were just using as a placeholder. You gotta remember, this was never intended to be aired. By the way, I'm pretty sure that's the kid from The People Under the Stairs.
Oh, I thought it was Rudy from the Huxtables.
I own this Sherman.
All you own is an attitude.
Don't be dissing me, you face-head motherfucker.
You want to describe what we just saw?
I could not do it justice. That was the most fucking bizarrest thing I've ever seen.
Okay, so pause it a second. Darkman's in a back alley where a African-American child is graffitiing the word evil, and Darkman takes exception to him spelling it E-V-O-L. And so this little homeless kid's got an attitude. He's like, get you, I spell the word however I feel like spelling it. And then he throws his spray can at Darkman, who catches it. Darkman uses his crazy person's strength to squeeze the spray can until it ruptures, until it blasts silver paint all over this poor kid, who then walks away from the wall to reveal a silhouette in the shape of his body. That was fucking ridiculous. It was absolutely like a cartoon. It was kind of hilarious. I'm not sure. I feel wrong about laughing at that. I feel like there must be something like insidious about that I'm not quite getting as a white dude, but I still laughed at it because it's so ridiculous to see that in live action.
The weirdest shit I've ever seen. Oh my god. Oh my god. It's loved by artists. But I enjoyed it quite a bit when I saw it in theater.
Okay.
I thought it was fucking weird.
So why didn't you follow up with any of the materials that came after, though? Like,
well, no, I did see the sequel. I told you I saw Darkman 2 and didn't particularly care for it.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the TV series. I had seen the comics, but I'd never been a big fan of adaptations of characters in comics from film, except maybe the Alien Predator stuff and the Terminator stuff, the sci-fi stuff. But like, I never read any of the, at that point, like Star Wars stuff or James Bond. The sci-fi stuff I did. Like RoboCop, Terminator, Predator, Alien. Those are the books that there was a division between the books and the series. So I could watch them. Where TV, like movies that went into comics, for me it's like Firefly. I enjoy watching the series and I like watching Serenity, but I can't read the comics because I need those actors, those little facial tics, those little idiocracies that they do to make me believe in the character. If I read it on a comic, I don't hear Malcolm Reynolds in my head.
So after seeing the movie and then you saw the directed home video, Darkman 2. No, nothing has ever appeared in the movie theater besides the first Darkman.
I think I rented it. I probably rented it. I probably did rent it.
I rented Darkman 2 as well, and I thought it was terrible, and I don't even know if I ever finished it. But I've been on a Darkman kick lately. It just so happened that Darkman 3 was running on cable, and I caught a few minutes of it and was amused by what I saw and decided to record Darkman 2 and 3. And I've been wanting to discuss Darkman. You decided to volunteer to watch Darkman 3 Die, Darkman Die. And related to that, we also watched the unused, unaired pilot that was released in 1992. The company put a lot of effort into publicizing it. I had a really strong ad campaign, and in fact, Raimi credits the ad campaign for making the movie work because he felt that the finished movie wasn't what he had been trying to make. He wasn't happy with the finished Darkman, but he felt that it made the money that it made because of the promotional campaign. The movie was made for $16 million, which was a reasonable sum back in the day. In adjusted dollars is about $30 million. It made about $46 million, which in adjusted dollars is about $89-90 million. Respectable money, but anything under $100 million these days, you're not really going to pay a lot of attention to. It is sort of similar to then. If they were expecting Batman Returns, they did not get that. So there wasn't any major immediate follow-up to the Darkman movie. They did do some novels, a novelization of the movie, and then they did created specifically 4 books, stories. They did a comic adaptation, and then a few years later they did additional new comics continuing the story. Well, obviously Raimi formed, I don't know if he had Renaissance before this point, because he hadn't done very many movies. He had done Evil Dead, which was a flick that he basically crowdsourced. Like everybody from the small town in Michigan that he came from donated to make that movie happen, which is why the rights for Evil Dead was always an issue for a number of years. When he made Evil Dead 2, he couldn't actually use any footage from the first Evil Dead because he didn't hold the rights to it. And that's why the Evil Dead 2 has, like, the first 20 minutes is an encapsulation of what happened in the first Evil Dead because he couldn't show any footage from the first movie. After Evil Dead 2, I want to say he did Darkman, and I think somewhere in the midst of that he also did the movie Crime Wave, which was a pretty big flop. It was like kind of a big, broad, violent comedy. And so he got Darkman made, and then I believe after Darkman, on the strength of Darkman, he finally got to do Army of Darkness, the big budget version of an Evil Dead movie. He went on to other stuff after this. I've listened to some podcasts related to Darkman. I was curious to see how other people saw the character and their interest in him. And most of the podcasts I listened to were very hard slagged on the Darkman sequels. One of them in particular was really railing against Sam Raimi, feeling that Raimi had just kind of cashed out, that he didn't care, what was done with these characters, that he was just doing it for the money. I felt like they failed to acknowledge that Raimi still wasn't anybody, at this point. In 1992, when this unaired pilot was produced, he was the guy who directed Army of Darkness and the Evil Dead movies. These were cult movies. They made pretty good money for horror movies, but if anything, they were infamous. I remember when I was a kid, 2020 did a special where they were just lambasting Evil Dead 2 for its extreme violence, and Evil Dead 2 was actually released without a rating because they couldn't get anything but an X rating from the MPAA. It obviously had its fans. A lot of people saw it and saw the brilliance of it, but that didn't translate into a lot of commercial clout. And so if he's trying to form his own company to do movies and television, he probably didn't have a ton of money to work with. None of the stuff he had done up to this point was hugely successful. So we watched the unaired pilot. It recast the lead character Peyton Westlake with the actor Christopher Bowen. Larry Drake came back for the pilot, among other things. And then there was a new character introduced named Jenny, played by Kathleen York.
I was kind of confused. I feel like there was some parts missing. It looks like the city went to shit because Durant's not running everything, and it feels to me like what a lot of shows were doing back then. I mean, do you remember War of the World?
Vaguely, yeah.
Okay. All the shows seem to do this weird thing where the reason I'm using War of the World as an example is if you watch it, like I think the first season or two, it's in present day, and in the last season, they decide to go into like this apocalyptic world, like, where societies crumble. A lot of these shows, even RoboCop, all of them had like this view of like the future where it was just dystopian. And so all their characters were based in the world. But they all started in movies or shows where an everyday event, like you could see it happening in your day-to-day event. But for some reason when they translate to TV show, like TV, they go to this darker, grittier, they're showing the city when explosions are occurring and homeless kids are running the streets rampant, and I'm just like, okay, so we went from like the first movie where everything was fine and y'all were just like this little gang turf war to the city's now crumbled. And
it's a good playground for action spectacles. They retold the origin of Peyton Westlake and how he became Darkman. In this story, Durant lives and is going to be an ongoing menace that Westlake's battling. At best, this is a side pull, where it's taking place alongside the first movie. But I actually think that this is like an alternate version of events where it's going to be where Durant's going to continue to be an ongoing crime lord menace that's the nemesis of the Peyton Westlake character. And obviously they're trying to introduce new supporting characters. They allude to the love of Peyton Westlake's life from the movie, but in none of the sequels do they ever feature that character. And they always introduce a new quasi-love interest, it seems like. In this case, it's the one good cop in the city, Jenny, and her partner had been killed by Durant, and so despite wanting to be a good cop and keep her nose clean, she recognizes the only way she's ever going to get Durant is by going against the law, since the law is working in favor of Durant, who's all lawyered up and mobbed up and everything else. It's basically a setup for an ongoing series without any kind of resolution.
But were there scenes missing?
I don't think that what we saw was ever intended to be broadcast on television. I think the intention was to show what kind of sets they could produce, what caliber of talent they could get for a show, give you a sense of the tone, give a sense of what changes they would make to adapt the movie to the screen, but also to show you scenes from the movie to show that if you give us a little bit of money, we could do a really cool, big, bombastic, action spectacle that would still be reasonably priced. Because, again, Raimi, I think, got a lot of mileage out of the $16 million in $1990, and I think that they were trying to show that if you give us the money, we could do something more with this. There are a lot of people that thought that the intention with this pilot was to pitch a half-hour action drama, crime drama kind of thing. I think that it was just a matter of they filled 22 minutes to give you a sense of what the show would feel like if they went to series, but obviously it was never intended to actually be shown because it's too cheap and there's too much stuff that doesn't really link together. It just gives you a sense of what they can get away with, I think.
Well, it does seem to plot jump around a lot. Mm-hmm. So that's okay. That makes more sense than that. That kind of helps me understand what we watched there.
They obviously cast an actor they thought was going to be okay for the series. They would be able to fill Liam Neeson's shoes, and they give you a sense of that sort of morbid humor that was present in the original Darkman movie, that he's singing "Put on a Happy Face" while he's digging a shallow grave for an underling. People always reference that Raimi was wanting to do a Batman movie or a Shadow movie, and because he couldn't secure the rights because he wasn't a big enough name, he just created his own variation on that. But I think Darkman is very clearly an amalgamation of a lot of different influences, and I think one of them very clearly is the abominable Dr. Phibes, the Vincent Price character from the 70s.
What lovely music for a murder, or 2, or 3, or 9. Who's this? Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet a dear friend.
9 killed you. 9 shall die.
Your wife, no, Phibes. But you I will kill.
But you can't, Doctor. I am already dead.
Here, how are we going to get him off this? You take his head, and I'll take his feet. Let's unscrew him.
Dr. Phibes, who samples the finer things of life in his own inimitable way, and experiments with fascinating instruments of death.
The what, sir? The guitar. The 10 curses visited upon the pharaohs before Exodus. 9 shall die. 9 eternities in doom. Curse of boils, of bats. Frogs? Frogs, yes. And the curse of blood.
He lives. From the depths of this unholy tomb, the Avenger rises. The abominable Dr. Phibes, the most deadly mastermind of all crime. Specialist in the fine art of bizarre murder, each more different, each more devilish than the last. Touché, Dr. Phibes. And as another victim falls, the world awaits your next blow of vengeance. Only one man, only one menace, only one diabolical mind could create such chilling terror.
That's not a common thief, sir.
Then, Inspector, you are faced with an impossible task. Well, there's no force in all the world could win a fight against such a supreme opponent.
Run, but you can't escape him. Hide, but he'll find you. Scream, but no one will hear you.
Are you ready for Dr. Phibes?
probably the most terrifying motion picture you'll ever see.
It's a guy whose wife dies on the operating room table, and so he blames the doctors that weren't able to save her life. And he himself, on the way to, catching up with her before she dies on the operating table, he has a car crash and gets horrifically burned. He's all chewed up. And what he does, he makes masks to make himself look like Vincent Price, so that when he needs to, he can appear like a normal human being, except that he also fucked up his voice box, so he always speaks through a mechanical voice box. I think the movies were set in the 1930s too, so there was a little bit of a steampunk kind of thing going on. Using the template of the plagues of Egypt, he murders each of the doctors that he holds responsible for the death of his wife. And so if you look at Dr. Phibes and you look at Darkman, and especially one of the things that was most infamous about Dr. Phibes is the end of the first movie, they play Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And you know that it's become a kind of a horror cliche to have like an anachronistic and unsaccharine song and milk it for scariness and horror in horror movies. Like Bad Moon Rising and American Werewolf in London. I'm thinking all the 20s music from The Shining. And even Evil Dead has that ragtime song at the end of the first Evil Dead movie. That little Tin Pan Alley to end off the movie. So I think that all comes from Dr. Phibes, and Darkman's continuing to play in that area, and they wanted to show that that's something that would have appeared in the TV show as well.
But I have found a sanctuary, a new home, an observatory, a place of science, abandoned like so many other things in this brave new world. I no longer belong to their world, so I created one of my own. This chamber was a planetarium once, stars and galaxies projected onto its dome. Now, it is my universe. A refuge with no mirrors, no reflections to gaze at.
What did you think of the guy they cast?
They definitely were trying to find someone who had an accent.
And it's funny because Liam Neeson didn't have an accent in Darkman. No, he was an Irishman playing an American.
And in this one, it felt like an Englishman playing an Englishman. And in the films were
kind of a weird hash. Because, let's be honest, Liam Neeson doesn't have the strongest American accent either. So I think you can always tell that he had a kind of a Tommy Wiseau thing going on where he's trying to sound like an American, but none of them ever sound like an American. And this is the one instance where they just went whole hog and said, fuck it, we're going to treat him as a British guy. Very strange to see Larry Drake turn up. You would have thought that he would, I guess he was just the dude from LA Law. He never had such a big career that it'd be beneath him to appear. Yeah. And I'm sure he doesn't get to cast as the tough guy with a gun very often, so he's probably getting off on it. I think he plays a menacing character. I think he does a good job with it.
He has that stare.
He's got a good scowl going on too. Yeah, he's got a nastiness to him. And I think it would have been cool to see him on a weekly series. He would have been available. He would have had the presence. I could see that actually working. I love seeing the kid from the People Up Their Stairs because I love that flick. Yeah, I'm one of the few people that actually love that movie. The actress who's playing the cop is terrible. She's good looking. She's over the eyes. Terrible actress though.
Definitely overacting.
Not even over. No, not acting. Like it sounded like she was reading cue cards the whole time.
Well, again, remember this is just for feel.
Agreed, but I don't think that she would have gone to series if they tried to do that. Like most everybody else in the movie is acting that isn't like a henchman. I think the guy they cast as Darkman could have actually pulled off a series. The kid could. Everybody but her. She's the only character who had a lot of lines, who has a major presence in the pilot, but there was no way she was going to make it to the series. I think it's just like Pretty Gal. Let's take advantage of the Pretty Gal for this pitch. But it went nowhere. But obviously Renaissance later went on to do quite a bit of television that you particularly was exposed to a lot of.
Well, yeah, because I was going to ask you if Renaissance was something like canon back in the day.
Well, you don't remember what Renaissance did? I'll give you a hint. You and Pussycat watched a lot of it. Xena, Hercules, Legendary Journey, Jack of All Trades with Bruce Campbell, and Cleopatra 2525.
Did they do Flash Gordon?
I don't think they did Flash Gordon, no.
Actually, I just had a conversation with someone. We were talking about old shows that were popping up on Channel 39 at the time.
Oh, yeah.
39 had this renaissance of, I guess, acquired a lot of different properties.
Well, it's not that I think that they were a home to a lot of syndication packages. Because none of this stuff was
brand new shows, though?
Yeah, but see, okay,
But going into the 90s, Sam Raimi was at the forefront of putting together these shows that were specifically for local channels. And they were cheap shows, and they were usually, one of the things that was interesting about Jack of All Trades and Cleopatra 2525 is these were action-adventure shows that only ran for half an hour, which is still a novel thing. You don't see that very much. It was one of the only companies that could successfully do that for any length of time. And I think there were some other shows, too, that were in that package that cycled in and out, and some of them were more successful than others. And a lot of actors that, are cult actors that we're fond of came out of those shows. Gina Torres was on those shows. Obviously, Lucy Lawless. Bruce Campbell spent most of his 90s career doing those shows. So, Renaissance actually did okay with it. Well, Kevin Sorbo's career kind of begins and ends with that and the Jesus movies. But Raimi managed to put genre television bring people into people's homes at a time when genre television was still kind of a dirty word. It was something that wasn't still embraced by the mainstream at all, and helped to mainstream it. But in particular, in the case of Xena is this feminist icon, beloved by children of the 90s, specifically girl-type children, and specifically your longtime ex was a huge Xena fan.
A xenophobe, if you will.
Xenophile.
Xenophile.
But it's funny because I was listening to one of these podcasts where they're like, really, Sam Raimi just doesn't give a shit. He's all about cashing in. It's like, so, and talking about, Hercules and Xena, that was shitty shows. It's like, they were maybe shitty to you, white dude, but, those shows actually meant something to other people.
I remember, we would stay home for Xena, and not only watch it, but she'd tape record them, and had a collection of VHS tapes numbered so that when they were off season, she would go back and rewatch the season. I was very familiar with Xena and Gabrielle.
Well, did y'all watch Hercules at all since it crossed over?
Not so much. She wasn't big into her. She was huge Xena and Jack of Trades. She really liked.
Yeah, I like Jack of All Trades a lot too, because of Bruce Campbell mostly. Yeah. But I also liked his interplay with the British chick that he worked with. Were they spies or were they con men or?
All I know is I would get through Xena. By that show, I would just sit on the couch quietly in my Xena coma. So okay.
It was a fun show. It definitely showcased Campbell's charms.
It was like a little block of TV shows. Like I want to say maybe on like Fridays.
So and another thing that was great about Xena is this was obviously coded lesbianism too in this show. So it wasn't just a show for chicks. It was a show for chicks of an alternative lifestyle that were not very well represented in media. And I'm sure Army of Darkness had a lot to do with messing this up. But I don't know if you remember at the end of Darkman, do you remember how that movie ends? Because I completely forgot this ever happened. At the very end of Darkman, the character has put on an artificial mask and is mingled into a crowd to disappear because he's made it clear that he's not going to stay with his lady love, his fiance, the lawyer. He's just going to go off and live whatever life he could manage now that he's broken the way that he is. And in the midst of the crowd, he turns slightly to the camera so you can see his new face, and it's Bruce Campbell. So at the end of the movie, Bruce Campbell is Darkman. How awesome would it have been if Bruce Campbell had done a TV series of Darkman and he'd been the Darkman? That would have been badass.
But then we wouldn't have had Briscoe County Jr.
That's true. And I do have to say I value Briscoe County Jr. a great deal. That's another show we have to do.
Watch it, but I remember watching it as a kid and really liked it.
No, me and Mac have been seriously talking about doing that. Actually, there was one night where he and I were hanging out, and I was like, okay, you ready to go ahead and start this show? And he's like, I don't think I'm there yet. And then recently he said, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to do the Briscoe County Jr. show. So it's totally on the one season, like 22 episodes, roughly. But that's true. And honestly, the thing is, as much as I love Bruce Campbell, I don't know that he's really Darkman. I don't know that he can bring that kind of pathos, give it a little, different kind of gravitas, a little, well, it's not the edge, it's the tragedy. I think that Campbell is so geared toward humor that it's hard to see him play. My example would be, I don't know if you remember, but Ed O'Neill, after Married with Children finally ended. And Ed O'Neill had a career before, Married with Children. He'd played Popeye Doyle in a TV movie sequel to The French Connection. And then he was Al Bundy for so many years. And then he had tried to play a general in For a Few Good Men. And they cut his scenes because the audience started laughing when he appeared on screen because they couldn't see the general. They only saw Al Bundy. And then in the mid to late 90s, he was actually on a new version of Dragnet, playing the Joe Friday character. And it's completely straight. It's not intended to be a comedy at all, but you just can't quite divorce yourself from Al Bundy's trying to be a homicide detective, And I think that Bruce Campbell might have had the same problem. It's really hard to see him play a straight character because he's done so many comedic characters, and it's where his greatest gifts are. He's great at doing serial comic characters, especially when there's a horror element to it, but also in the adventure series like Xena and Jack of All Trades.
Yeah.
Or was he on Xena or Hercules more? Or that character crossed over, right?
He crossed over, but I remember him on Xena because we watched Xena, so he was popping on Xena.
I'm not a superstitious person, but as a podcaster, you can't help but notice that some projects are just cursed. This episode has been in the works for nearly 3 years, but you probably couldn't help but notice that the audio quality started shitty and only got worse. I planned to re-record some of this material, but the truth is that every time I broached the subject, nobody really seemed to give a crap about Darkman. I feel like Fix-It shot his load on that first round, and I didn't want to drag another take out of him. My father has the movie trilogy DVD set, so I rewatched the sequels just a few months ago in my hotel room when I'd planned to spend time with him. I figured we'd get some recordings in, but that didn't work out on account of COVID. Resources I'd ordered to supplement the episode were put on back order and then never arrived. I was going to read the first novel for free on the Internet Archive during a vacation, but the file got pulled just ahead of that vacation. I started and never finished another couple of novels. I even did an open plea for interested parties on Twitter months back, which is how we scored Chuck Coletta to discuss the Dick Tracy movie, but had no such luck with Darkman. There's no takers. I'd planned to set aside more prep time for editing this episode, but I knew the files I had were a mess, and some of the stuff turned up missing. I'm still trying to find it. Anyway, I procrastinated, thinking I had until at least next week, only to realize Sunday evening that the exact date was this past Monday, for the 30th anniversary. So you're getting the best podcast I could throw together in a few free hours, and I'm not the least bit sorry because I'd have only worked harder to get the same sorry result. Here's the thing. I'm a lifelong superhero fan who saw Superman the motion picture theater. I'd waited my entire young life to see a superhero movie that reflected the sensibilities of the comics I love. Most were just corny or campy or cheesy or chintzy, betraying a lack of understanding or respect for my reading experience. I saw Batman 3 times in 1989 and didn't particularly like it any of those times. I don't hate the Batman movie, but it had obvious limitations and the film was clearly more interested in its villain than its hero. I saw Batman that third time because my brother wanted to see it, and I didn't see that many movies or spend that much time with him. Weekends here and there for a few years, really. My recollection is that we saw Darkman together on my side of town in my regular theater. My brother stayed with me maybe twice, since we were poor and you tend to want to trade up, right? But this one time I got to host him. We went to a movie that we were both very excited about, and we had an absolute blast. It was everything that we were hoping for. When I read his copies of The Dark Knight Returns and Year One, when he read my copies of Grimjack and Martial Law, we were both teenagers high on violent anti-heroes, and Darkman was cut from the same cloth as the badasses we revered and emulated from those comics. It was clear that Sam Raimi was an actual comic book fan who'd read and internalized the same comics we had, and the result was a movie that was on our wavelength in 1990. It felt like something Frank Miller would do, back when what Miller would do was something you wanted to see done. It was the first true modern-age comic book movie to me, and the standard I held against all others for years. I really enjoyed Batman Returns, but it was still more of a Tim Burton movie than a comic book one. The Matrix had next-level style and action choreography, but that was science fiction, and I had never invested in the actual characters. X-Men? Please. As I mentioned earlier, it wasn't until the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I finally found movies that were truer to the spirit of comic books than Darkman. Raimi owed a major debt to the pulp that preceded comics, and that I've had limited exposure to. Darkman was also a hybrid with horror, another genre dear to my heart, but a pulpy horror comic isn't necessarily as reflective of the source material from this particular medium as an actual superhero team-up like the Avengers. Darkman is a product of its time and limited budget. I'm not the same angry young man that saw it 30 years ago, so the film isn't going to hit me or anyone else the same way it once did. But as I'm recording this coda, there's a fucking wicked sweet soda now playing Darkman action figure prowling along my bookcase. It's modeled after the movie poster, steel girder and all. They gave him 2 different heads and 2 sets of hands, one with gauze, one with gloves. He even comes with a removable fedora. I scored it at Comic Palooza for something like $20, and I've seen it go for a few hundred online. That's nice and all, but I wouldn't have it any other way than for him to be ripped out of the goddamn packaging and up where I can see him when the mood strikes. I do have one regret though. I had a long navy trench coat that I wore throughout most of junior high. A roll of gauze didn't cost much of anything. Why did my poor ass ever go as Darkman for Halloween? And I haven't dressed up in a costume in years, and I've never cosplayed to a con, but trust that Darkman is on my short list if that status ever changes. Also, trust that Darkman will return in another episode of a podcast, probably sooner rather than later, but we'll give it a little bit of space. Maybe I can get those fucking back orders in. In the meantime, we'll thank the 108 Sage, Dr. Ange, Baby Skeletor, Chris at Bad Books for Beginners, Chris Dunford, Chris Lydon, Christopher Bush, DeBache, Daniel French for Sponius Sound Design, David Ace Gutierrez, Delvin, who asked of the Darkman episode, wait, am I joining the network and no one told me? Dindro Kakalia Japan, El Romero, Gregory Litchfield, Watam Shioran, The Hammer Strikes, Random Geeky Stuff, History of Comics on Film, I Was Joe Crawford, It's Plastic Man, Jeffrey Brown, JMT Productions, Julie Duchesne, Shot in the Dark, Keith G. Baker, Kenji Tasaka, King Dinosaur, Luke Giaconetti of Earth Destruction Directive Podcast, Maz of Mazinger 1978, Michael Wagner, Mike Send Aliens to Me, Odell Abner Dracula, who said of this episode simply in all caps, yes, Paul Matthew Carr, Rad Adventures Podcasting Network, Randy Caldwell, Richard G., who thanked us for the shout out, Scott X, Seer Wars and Beyond Podcast, Tim Price Podcrasher, Tyrannosuke 0315, Truckonomics Trekbot, Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace Podcast, and Zach Sally.